After an accident, a millionaire hires a nurse. He tries to resist, but the inevitable happens. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The Seattle rain painted elegant streaks across the floor-to-ceiling windows of Rhodes International Hotel's executive office. Killian Thomas Rhodes stood before the vast expanse of glass, his 6'2" frame casting a long shadow across the pristine marble floor. His steel-blue eyes tracked the movement of clouds across the darkening sky, a habit he'd developed over years of controlling everything within his reach. Even his observation of nature held military precision. At 36, Killian had mastered the art of commanding attention without seeking it. His dark brown hair, always meticulously styled back, complemented the perfectly maintained beard that enhanced his strong jawline. Today, he wore a charcoal cashmere sweater over a custom-tailored white shirt, paired with designer jeans and limited-edition sneakers that cost more than most people's monthly rent. A carefully curated image of casual luxury that spoke volumes about his position in life. The corner office on the 42nd floor served as more than just a workspace. It was his fortress of solitude. Every surface gleamed with purpose. The sleek mahogany desk, the leather chairs positioned at exact angles, the strategic placement of every device and document. Even the air seemed to vibrate with the energy of careful control. "Mr. Rhodes?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The board meeting starts in 5 minutes." Killian pressed the response button without looking. "On my way." His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who never needed to raise it to be heard. The elevator ride down to the conference level was silent, just as he preferred. Other executives who might have joined him knew better than to attempt small talk. Killian Thomas Rhodes didn't do small talk. He did results, strategies, and solutions. Emotions were inefficient. Personal connections were complications he couldn't afford in his relentless pursuit of excellence. The board meeting proceeded like a well-orchestrated symphony, with Killian as its conductor. Quarterly projections exceeded expectations. New property acquisitions in Miami and Boston were proceeding ahead of schedule. The international expansion into Dubai was garnering unprecedented interest. "Excellent work, everyone," he concluded, his words precise and measured. "Let's maintain this momentum." It wasn't praise, it was an expectation voiced as fact. As the board members filed out, Killian remained seated, reviewing notes on his tablet. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows with increasing urgency. He checked his watch, 7:45 p.m. Another late night. But time meant nothing when empire building was the goal. His phone buzzed with a message from his uncle Elliot. "The roses are blooming early this year. Perhaps it's time you saw them." Killian allowed himself a slight smile. His uncle, the former military officer turned philosophical gardener, always tried to pull him away from work with these cryptic messages. But empire builders didn't have time for roses. The parking garage was nearly empty when Killian reached his car, a sleek black luxury vehicle that purred to life at his touch. The rain had transformed Seattle's streets into reflecting pools, mirroring the city lights in fractured patterns. He navigated through downtown with practiced ease, his mind already processing tomorrow's objectives. That's when it happened. Later, he would remember it in fragments: the sudden glare of headlights through the rain, the screech of tires on wet asphalt, the world spinning in slow motion as his car hydroplaned, the sickening crunch of metal meeting concrete, the airbag's explosive deployment. Then, darkness. When consciousness returned, it came in waves of pain and confusion. Voices floated around him, urgent but distant. "Male, mid-30s, severe impact." The words faded in and out like a badly tuned radio. The hospital room materialized around him in stages. First the antiseptic smell, then the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Finally, the stark white ceiling swimming into focus. A doctor stood at the foot of his bed, speaking words that seemed impossible. Multiple fractures, extensive physical therapy, temporary loss of mobility. Killian tried to sit up, but his body betrayed him for the first time in his life. Pain shot through his legs, his back, his pride. The doctor continued talking about recovery timelines and rehabilitation protocols, but Killian had stopped listening. His mind was racing through implications, board meetings, property inspections, client negotiations. His entire carefully constructed world of control and command was crumbling. "You'll need full-time care during your recovery," the doctor was saying. I'm recommending one of our best private nurses. No, Killian's voice was hoarse but firm. I don't need... Mr. Rhodes, the doctor interrupted, matching his firmness. This isn't optional. Without proper care, your recovery could be compromised, leading to permanent mobility issues. Permanent. The word hit him like a second crash. Killian Thomas Rhodes, the man who had built an empire through sheer force of will and unflinching control, was now at the mercy of his own broken body. In his hospital room, high above Seattle's rain-soaked streets, he stared out at the city lights blurring through his window. His empire still stood, but its emperor had fallen. For the first time since he was a child, Killian felt something he'd spent his entire adult life avoiding: vulnerability. The rain continued its relentless descent, washing away the illusion of control he'd spent years perfecting. In its place, a new reality was taking shape, one where the mighty Killian Thomas Rhodes would have to learn what it meant to depend on someone else. As night settled over Seattle, he lay in his hospital bed, his kingdom just visible through the rain-streaked windows, yet further away than it had ever been. Tomorrow his new life would begin, a life where control was an illusion, and strength might mean something entirely different than what he'd always believed. The monitors beeped steadily in the darkness, counting out the rhythm of a life about to change. Outside, Seattle's rain kept falling, indifferent to the plans and powers of men who thought they could control the world. And somewhere in the city, unknown to him, the person who would transform his life was preparing to enter his world, not with a bang, but with the quiet grace of healing. Selina Monique Hayes stood before the imposing glass and concrete mansion in Seattle's exclusive Laurelhurst neighborhood, her honey-colored eyes taking in every detail. The modern structure seemed to rise from the earth like a declaration of power, all clean lines and strategic angles. Much like its owner, she thought, remembering the brief she'd received about her new patient. Rain misted around her as she adjusted her cream-colored cardigan and smoothed down her tailored navy scrubs. At 29, Selina carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to give. Her natural curls were swept up in a neat bun, revealing the elegant curve of her neck and the simple pearl earrings, her mother's graduation gift. The security system chimed softly as she pressed her thumb to the biometric scanner. The massive front door unlocked with a subtle click, and Selina stepped into what would become her workplace for the next few months. The foyer opened into a vast living space where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Lake Washington. Miss Hayes. The voice was cold, precise, and unmistakably annoyed. Killian Thomas Rhodes sat in a wheelchair near the windows, his commanding presence undiminished by his temporary confinement. His steel-blue eyes assessed her with the same clinical detachment one might use to evaluate a business proposition. Mr. Rhodes. Selina's voice was warm but firm, like Georgia sunshine in late autumn. I'm here to help you recover, not to be your enemy. I don't need help, he stated flatly. I need efficiency. The hospital insists on this arrangement, but let's be clear. I run Empire from this chair if necessary. Selina set her professional bag down and met his gaze steadily. Then we should discuss how to get you out of that chair as efficiently as possible. She pulled out her worn leather notebook, a habit she'd developed during her first year of nursing in Atlanta. Shall we review your recovery plan? Something flickered in Killian's eyes, surprise perhaps at her unruffled response to his coldness. He was used to people either cowering or competing. Selina did neither. Your previous nurse lasted exactly 2 days, he said, watching her carefully. I'm not the previous nurse. Selina began unpacking her supplies with methodical grace. I'm the one who's going to help you walk again, Mr. Rhodes. Whether you like me or not is irrelevant to that goal. The morning unfolded in a dance of wills. Killian questioned every instruction, challenged every suggestion. Selina responded with unwavering patience and occasional hints of gentle humor that seemed to perplex him more than anger him. During their first physical therapy session, when pain caused him to grip the parallel bars until his knuckles went white, Selina didn't offer empty encouragement. Instead, she hummed softly, an old soul tune her father used to play on his saxophone. The melody filled the space between them, neither demanding attention nor asking for recognition. What is that? Killian asked, his voice tight with exertion. Music helps regulate breathing, she replied simply, and breathing helps manage pain. I don't need, he began. Management strategies? Selina raised an eyebrow. A CEO should appreciate those. For a fraction of a second, his mask slipped, and something almost like amusement crossed his face. Almost. The days began to find their rhythm. Selina arrived each morning at precisely 7 a.m., bringing with her an energy that somehow managed to be both soothing and invigorating. She organized his medications by color in sleek containers, maintained detailed progress notes in her ever-present notebook, and moved through his space with a grace that seemed to soften the mansion's hard edges. One morning, she found him already awake, staring out at the lake with undisguised frustration. Her tablet displaying stock market figures lay discarded on his lap. "The markets opened early," she asked, setting up his morning routine. "They never close," he replied tersely. "Neither does business." Selina studied him for a moment, noting the tension in his shoulders, the shadows under his eyes. "The human body does, though. Even CEOs need rest to heal. I didn't build an empire by resting." "No," she agreed, preparing his morning exercises. "But you might lose one by pushing too hard, too fast." Her words were gentle but landed with precision. Killian turned to look at her, really look at her, perhaps for the first time. Selina met his gaze calmly, her honey-colored eyes reflecting both compassion and unflinching truth. "You're not afraid of me," he stated, something like curiosity creeping into his voice. "Should I be?" She helped him position his wheelchair for their morning routine. "Fear doesn't heal anyone, Mr. Rhodes. Neither does anger." As she guided him through his exercises, Selina noticed small changes. His resistance was becoming less rigid, his responses less clipped. When she adjusted his position, he no longer flinched at her touch, as if it were an invasion. During their afternoon session, while helping him with water therapy in the mansion's indoor pool, Selina caught him watching her reflection in the water's surface. She was demonstrating a movement, her hands moving with practiced grace through the water. "My mother was a nurse," she said quietly, continuing the exercise. "She taught me that healing isn't just about the body. It's about finding strength you didn't know you had." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," he replied, his voice lacking its usual edge. "She is." Selina smiled, remembering Sunday dinners in Atlanta, soul music playing softly in the background, while her mother shared wisdom disguised as casual conversation. "She also taught me that the strongest people are those who learn to accept help." Killian's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, focusing on the exercises. The water lapped gently against the pool's edges, filling the space between them with its quiet rhythm. Later that evening, as Selina prepared to leave, she found Killian in his study, attempting to reach a book on a high shelf. His wheelchair couldn't quite bring him close enough, and frustration radiated from his entire being. Without a word, she crossed the room and retrieved the book. Instead of handing it to him directly, she placed it on his desk, within easy reach. It was a small gesture, but one that preserved his dignity while acknowledging his temporary limitations. "Thank you," he said stiffly, as if the words were unfamiliar in his mouth. "You're welcome, Mr. Rhodes." She gathered her things, heading for the door. "Tomorrow, we'll work on strategies for reaching higher shelves. Small victories lead to bigger ones." As she drove home that night, through Seattle's endless rain, Selina reflected on her patient. Beneath his fortress of control and success, she glimpsed something else. A man learning the hardest lesson of all, that true strength often begins with surrender. In her apartment, as she prepared her nightly chamomile tea, Selina made notes in her worn leather notebook. Between clinical observations about physical progress, she wrote a simple truth. Healing happens in the spaces between resistance and acceptance. The rain continued its gentle percussion against her windows, a reminder of nature's patience. Like water wearing away at stone, sometimes the greatest changes came not through force, but through persistent gentleness. Tomorrow would bring another day of challenges, resistance and small victories, but tonight Selina smiled, knowing that behind Killian's walls of glass and steel, something was beginning to shift. Not with the dramatic force he was accustomed to, but with the quiet power of compassion meeting determination. In the game of healing hearts and bodies, patience was more than a virtue. It was a strategy. And Selina Monique Hayes had learned long ago that the sweetest victories were those won with gentle persistence and unwavering grace. The Thursday morning dawned with unusual clarity in Seattle, sunlight streaming through the mansion's vast windows. Selina arrived to find Killian already in his home office, surrounded by multiple screens displaying market trends and property portfolios. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed another sleepless night. "You're supposed to be resting," she said, setting down her bag. The morning light caught her honey-colored eyes, making them appear almost amber. "The Shanghai market doesn't rest. Killian replied without looking up. Neither do our competitors. Selina moved through the space with practiced ease, opening blinds to let in more natural light. 3 weeks into their routine, she'd learned to read the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when pain competed with pride. Your body needs to heal more than your portfolio needs attention, she countered, her voice carrying that blend of sweetness and steel that seemed to be her signature. Besides, you have a visitor coming today. This caught his attention. I don't have any meetings scheduled. Your uncle called. He's driving down from Portland. The change in Killian's demeanor was subtle but immediate. Something shifted in his eyes, a softening so slight it might have been imaginary. Elliot doesn't need to. He's already on his way, Selina interrupted gently. Now, shall we do your morning exercises before he arrives? During their therapy session, Selina noticed Killian was pushing harder than usual. Each movement was more determined, each rep more intense, as if he were trying to prove something before his uncle's arrival. Careful, she warned, supporting his weight as he worked with the parallel bars. Progress isn't about speed. I know my limits, he growled through gritted teeth. Do you? Selina's question hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning beyond the physical. Before he could respond, the security system chimed. Through the glass walls, they could see a vintage Jeep pulling into the circular driveway. Elliot Bernard Rhodes stepped out, his military bearing evident despite his casual attire, worn leather jacket, faded jeans, and boots that had seen better days. At 64, Elliot carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing left to prove. His green eyes, set in a weathered face, held decades of stories. In one hand, he carried what appeared to be a homemade pie. Still torturing my nephew, I see, he called out to Selina as he entered, his voice warm with humor. Just teaching him the value of patience, Mr. Rhodes, she replied, smiling. Please, it's Elliot. He set the pie down on a nearby table. And good luck with that. Patience isn't exactly a Rhodes family trait. Killian watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. You didn't need to drive all this way, Uncle. The roses are blooming early this year, Elliot said cryptically, settling into an armchair. Some things can't wait for convenient timing. Selina began gathering her equipment, preparing to give them privacy, but Elliot's voice stopped her. Stay, if you don't mind. I brought enough terrible pie for everyone. Something in his tone, a mixture of authority and gentleness, made it hard to refuse. Selina found herself sitting with them as Elliot served slices of what turned out to be a surprisingly inedible apple pie. Still haven't mastered baking, I see, Killian commented, pushing the pie around his plate. Some battles aren't worth winning, Elliot replied with a shrug. Speaking of battles, how's the recovery coming along? He's making progress, Selina answered, when Killian remained silent. Though he'd make more if he actually slept at night instead of watching international markets. Elliot's eyes twinkled. Ah, the famous Rhodes stubbornness. You know, Killian, it reminds me of my time in Seoul. Uncle, Killian warned, but Elliot continued as if he hadn't heard. We had this commander, brilliant tactician, tough as nails. Pushed himself so hard, he ended up collapsing during a crucial operation. Want to know what he said to me afterward? Selina leaned forward slightly, intrigued. Killian remained stoic, but his attention was fixed on his uncle. He said, Rhodes, I learned more about strength lying in that hospital bed than I ever did commanding troops. Took me years to understand what he meant. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Selina watched as something passed between uncle and nephew, an understanding built on years of shared history. How are your roses doing? Killian asked finally, clearly attempting to change the subject. They grow how they want to grow, Elliot replied, his eyes meeting Selina's briefly. The best we can do is provide the right conditions and trust the process. The conversation drifted to lighter topics, but Selina noticed how Elliot kept steering it back to moments of significance, stories about resilience, about transformation, about the strength found in vulnerability. Each tale was delivered casually, wrapped in military anecdotes or gardening metaphors, but their impact was evident in the subtle changes in Killian's posture. As the afternoon light began to fade, Elliot stood to leave. Miss Hayes, he said, turning to Selina, would you mind showing me out? I have a question about physical therapy techniques. Once they were in the foyer, out of Killian's earshot, Elliot's expression grew serious. You're good for him, he said quietly. He doesn't make it easy, but you're reaching him. I'm just doing my job, Selina replied, though they both knew it wasn't that simple. No, Elliot shook his head. You're doing much more than that. You're teaching him something he never learned. That strength isn't about control, it's about adaptation. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. "These are some of the things that helped me after my own injury in service. Maybe they'll help him too." Selina took the notebook, feeling the weight of trust it represented. "Thank you, Elliot. Take care of him," he said, then added with a slight smile, "and take care of yourself too. Rhodes men can be challenging." After Elliot left, Selina found Killian in his study, staring out at the darkening sky. The remnants of his uncle's terrible pie sat untouched on his desk. "He likes you," Killian said without turning around. "Elliot doesn't like many people." "He loves you very much," Selina replied, moving to stand beside his wheelchair. "That's why he comes. He comes because he knows what it's like." Killian's voice was barely above a whisper. "To lose control, to have to rebuild." Something shifted in the air between them. For a moment, the masks they both wore, professional and patient, caregiver and CEO, seemed to thin. "Loss of control doesn't equal loss of strength," Selina said softly. "Sometimes it's the beginning of finding a different kind of power." Killian turned to look at her, then really look at her, as if seeing past her role as his nurse for the first time. The evening light played across his features, softening the hard lines of authority into something more vulnerable, more real. "Different doesn't always mean worse," she added, her voice gentle but firm. The silence that followed was different from their usual ones, less a battlefield and more a bridge. Outside, Seattle's eternal rain began again, drumming against the windows in a soothing rhythm. "Your uncle's pie really is terrible," Selina said finally, breaking the tension with a small smile. "The worst," Killian agreed, and for the first time since she'd met him, something like genuine amusement crossed his face. "He's been trying to perfect that recipe for 20 years. Some battles aren't worth winning," Selina quoted, and was rewarded with what might have been the ghost of a real smile. Later that night, after Selina had gone home, Killian sat in his study, reading through some of the papers Elliot had accidentally left behind. Among them was a quote that caught his eye. "The oak fought the wind and was broken. The willow bent when it must, and survived." He looked out at the rain-soaked city, thinking about willows and oaks, about roses that bloomed early, and about honey-colored eyes that saw through walls he'd spent years building. For the first time in weeks, he felt something shift inside him. Not the frustration of loss, but the stirring of possibility. In her own apartment, Selina sat with her chamomile tea, reading through Elliot's notebook. Between military observations and gardening notes, she found wisdom that spoke to both her patient and her heart. On one page, in faded ink, she read, "The strongest hearts are those that learn to bend without breaking." The rain continued its gentle symphony against both their windows, two souls in different parts of the city, connected by more than they yet understood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new resistances, new opportunities for growth. But tonight, in the quiet aftermath of Elliot's visit, something had changed. Subtle as a rose beginning to bloom, powerful as a willow learning to bend. The dream always started the same way. Screeching tires, shattering glass, the world spinning out of control. Killian jolted awake in his bed, sheets tangled around him, his body damp with cold sweat. The digital clock on his nightstand read 3:17 a.m. He pushed himself up, grimacing at the familiar pain that shot through his legs. The mansion felt impossibly large in these quiet hours, when sleep eluded him, and memories crashed like waves against the shores of his consciousness. The sound of soft footsteps made him freeze. "Mr. Rhodes?" Selina's voice carried through the darkness. She'd been staying late recently, concerned about his recurring nightmares. "I'm fine," he called out, his voice rougher than intended. The door opened anyway, and Selina entered, silhouetted by the hallway light. She wore a simple, oversized sweater over her scrubs, her curls falling loose around her shoulders, a rare sight that made her seem somehow more real, more present. "You're not fine," she said simply, moving to his bedside with practiced ease. "And that's okay. I don't need a witness to your vulnerability," she interrupted, turning on the soft bedside lamp. "Sometimes we don't get to choose what we need, Mr. Rhodes." In the gentle light, Killian could see the concern in her honey-colored eyes. It wasn't pity. He'd learned to recognize the difference in the weeks she'd been caring for him. This was something else, something that made his carefully constructed walls feel suddenly fragile. "The dreams," he found himself saying, "they're always about the moment of losing control." Selina sat in the chair beside his bed, her presence somehow both professional and intimately comforting. "Control is an illusion, you know. Even before the accident, An illusion that built an empire. An illusion that's keeping you from healing. She reached for the glass of water on his nightstand, handed it to him. Your body knows how to heal itself. Your mind is the one fighting the process. Their fingers brushed as he took the glass, and something electric passed between them. Killian found himself studying her face in the dim light, the gentle curve of her cheekbones, the quiet strength in her expression, the way her presence seemed to fill the enormous room without demanding any space at all. "Tell me about Atlanta," he said suddenly, surprising them both. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "What would you like to know?" "Anything. Everything." "What makes someone leave home to care for difficult patients in Seattle?" "Who says you're difficult?" Her eyes sparkled with gentle humor. "I've had worse. At least you haven't tried to escape through a window yet." "Someone did that?" "Second floor. Broke both legs. Ended up being my patient twice as long." She settled more comfortably in the chair. "But Atlanta. Atlanta is soul food Sundays and music in the streets. It's wisdom passed down like family recipes, and strength that flows through generations like a river." As she spoke, painting pictures with her words, Killian felt the tension in his body begin to ease. Her voice carried him away from the sterile mansion, away from boardrooms and balance sheets, to a world of warm evenings and warmer hearts. "My father played saxophone," she continued, her voice taking on a dreamy quality. "He could make that instrument speak in ways words never could. My mother would dance while she cooked, saying music was God's way of teaching us how to move through life's rhythms." "They sound remarkable," Killian said softly. "They taught me that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about finding the right rhythm for each person's dance." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Even those who think they can't dance at all." The night seemed to wrap around them like a cocoon, creating an intimate space where titles and roles began to blur. Killian found himself sharing things he'd never voiced aloud, about the pressure of legacy, the loneliness of leadership, the fear that had taken root since the accident. "I used to think vulnerability was weakness," he admitted, watching shadows dance across the ceiling. "And now? Now, I'm not sure of anything anymore." Selina leaned forward slightly, her eyes intent. "That's not weakness, Mr. Rhodes. That's the beginning of wisdom." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows. Killian realized his pain had subsided, replaced by a different kind of awareness, of her presence, of the changing air between them, of possibilities he'd never allowed himself to consider. "You should try to sleep," she said, finally standing. The movement brought her closer to him, and for a moment the air seemed charged with unspoken words. "Selina," he said, her first name feeling foreign yet right on his tongue. "Thank you." She paused at the door, looking back at him. "Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is let ourselves be seen, Mr. Rhodes, even in the dark." After she left, Killian lay awake, but not from pain or nightmares. Her words echoed in his mind, along with the memory of her silhouette in the doorway, the gentle strength of her presence, the way she made his vast mansion feel like something closer to a home. The next morning brought a new challenge. Killian's board of directors had scheduled an emergency virtual meeting, insisting on seeing their CEO. Selina found him in his study, struggling with his tie, frustration evident in every line of his body. Without a word, she stepped in front of him, her hands moving to adjust the silk fabric. The intimacy of the gesture wasn't lost on either of them. Her fingers worked with professional efficiency, but there was something more in the way she smoothed the tie against his chest, in the way his breath caught when she leaned close. "There," she said softly, stepping back. "Now you look like the empire builder they expect." "And what do you see?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Their eyes met in the morning light, and for a moment, all the carefully maintained boundaries between them seemed to waver. "I see a man learning that real strength often comes disguised as surrender," she answered finally. The board meeting went smoothly, Killian projecting his usual authority from behind his desk. But throughout the video call, he was acutely aware of Selina's presence just off camera, keeping watch over him like a guardian angel in navy scrubs. Later that afternoon, during their therapy session, something shifted. As Selina helped him with his exercises, her touch seemed to linger longer than necessary, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that had nothing to do with professional concern. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she murmured, supporting his weight as he worked with the parallel bars. "Maybe I have something to prove," he replied, his voice low and intimate. "To whom?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Killian looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the way the afternoon light played across her features, the strength and grace in her movements, the complexity in her honey-colored eyes. "To myself," he said finally. "To you." Selina's hands steadied him as he took another step, but her touch felt different now, charged with something beyond mere support. "You have nothing to prove to me, Killian," she said softly, his first name slipping out naturally. The use of his given name, the electricity of her touch, the weight of unspoken feelings, it all culminated in a moment of crystal clarity. Something was changing between them, as inevitable as the tide, as unstoppable as healing itself. That evening, as Selina prepared to leave, she found Killian in his study again, silhouetted against the sunset. He'd managed to wheel himself to the window without assistance, a small victory that somehow felt monumental. "Progress comes in many forms," she said, moving to stand beside him. "Yes," he agreed, looking up at her. "It does." The sunset painted the room in shades of gold and rose, casting a warm glow over them both. In that light, all the barriers they'd built, professional, personal, emotional, seemed as fragile as glass and just as transparent. Neither spoke of the changing current between them, of the way their professional relationship was evolving into something more complex, more profound. But as Selina drove home that night, and as Killian sat watching the last rays of sun fade over Seattle's skyline, they both knew that tomorrow would bring them one day closer to a truth they were only beginning to understand. The physical therapy room in Killian's mansion blazed with morning light. Selina watched as he gripped the parallel bars, determination etched on his features. 6 weeks into his recovery, and his progress was remarkable, medically speaking. But it was the unseen changes that fascinated her most. 3 more steps, she encouraged, positioned to catch him if necessary. Her hands hovered near his waist, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Killian's jaw clenched as he took another step. Sweat darkened his fitted grey t-shirt, and Selina found herself noticing the way it clung to his shoulders, the powerful lines of his arms as he supported his weight. "Looking good, Mr. Rhodes," she said, maintaining professional distance in her voice, if not in her thoughts. "Back to Mr. Rhodes, are we?" He threw her a knowing glance. After last night's conversation, Selina felt heat rise to her cheeks, remembering their late-night talk in his study. The way his voice had softened when he'd asked about her childhood, the intensity in his eyes when she'd described her dreams of opening her own rehabilitation center someday. "Professional boundaries are important," she replied, though the words felt hollow even to her. "Are they?" He completed the final steps with unexpected grace. "Or are they just another form of control?" Before she could respond, his tablet chimed with an incoming video call. The board of directors, again. They'd been increasingly insistent about his return to the office, despite his ongoing recovery. "Take it," Selina said, helping him to his wheelchair. "I'll get your jacket." She returned with a tailored blazer, helping him slide it over his shoulders. The domestic intimacy of the gesture wasn't lost on either of them. Her fingers brushed the nape of his neck, and she felt him tense, not from pain this time. "Selina," he began, but the tablet chimed again more urgently. "Later," she said softly, wheeling him to his desk. "Business empires wait for no man. Remember?" The meeting was tense. Selina stayed just out of view, but she could hear everything. The board was pushing for his return, citing declining stock prices and investor concerns. Killian handled them with his usual authority, but she noticed the slight tremor in his hand as he gripped the armrest. "I understand your concerns," his voice carried that familiar commanding tone, "but rushing my recovery could lead to longer-term complications." "The company needs its leader, Killian," one board member insisted. "Physical presence matters." After the call ended, Killian sat in silence, staring out at the Seattle skyline. Storm clouds were gathering, matching his mood. "They're right," he said finally. "The company needs—" "What about what you need?" Selina moved to face him, her honey-colored eyes fierce with protective instinct. "Your recovery isn't just about walking again, it's about—" "About what?" he challenged, wheeling closer to her. "Teaching me patience, humility, how to depend on others." "About learning that strength comes in many forms," she countered, standing her ground. "About understanding that vulnerability is a luxury I can't afford." His voice was sharp, but something else flickered in his eyes. Fear, perhaps, or longing. Thunder rumbled outside as they faced each other, the air between them charged with more than just the approaching storm. Selina was acutely aware of how close he was, how his presence seemed to fill the space around her despite his seated position. "Everyone can afford vulnerability," she said softly, "even empire builders." Lightning flashed, illuminating his features. For a moment, the masks they both wore, professional and patient, caregiver and CEO, seemed to dissolve in the electric air. "What do you want from me, Selina?" His voice was low, intimate. "The question is, what do you want, Killian?" The use of his first name seemed to break something between them. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, their fingers intertwining with an intensity that belied their gentle touch. "I want—" he started, but was interrupted by the security system's chime. They broke apart as Elliot entered, shaking rain from his leather jacket. He took in the scene with knowing eyes, their flushed faces, the lingering tension in the air. "Bad time done?" he asked, though his slight smile suggested he knew exactly what he'd walked in on. "Uncle," Killian's voice was carefully controlled, "we weren't expecting you." "Storms have a way of changing plans," Elliot replied cryptically, setting down what appeared to be another of his infamous pies. "Thought you might need some company." Selina moved to leave, but Elliot's voice stopped her. "Stay, Miss Hayes. I think we all need to have a conversation." She sank into an armchair, her heart racing. Killian wheeled himself to the window, his back to them both, tension visible in every line of his body. "The board called me," Elliot said without preamble. "They're concerned about more than just your physical recovery." "My personal life is not their concern," Killian's voice was ice. "When it affects the company, they make it their concern." Elliot's tone was gentle but firm. "They've noticed changes in you. The way you handle calls, your priorities, your connections." The implication hung heavy in the air. Selina felt her professional world tilting on its axis. "I should go," she stood abruptly. "This is a family matter." "You are the matter," Elliot said quietly. "Or rather, what's growing between you two is." Lightning flashed again, throwing their shadows against the walls. Killian turned his wheelchair sharply, facing them. "My personal life could cost you everything you've built," Elliot finished, "unless you're ready to fight for what really matters." The storm raged outside, but the real tempest was in the room. Selina felt tears threatening and blinked them back. She was a professional. She had boundaries. She had— "I won't let them dictate my recovery," Killian's voice cut through her thoughts. "Or my heart." The words hung in the air, shocking in their rawness. Selina's eyes met his, and in that moment, all pretense fell away. The CEO and the nurse disappeared, leaving just a man and a woman standing on the edge of something profound. "Then you better be sure," Elliot said softly. "Both of you. Because storms like this, they change landscapes forever." He left them then, taking his unspoken wisdom and untouched pie with him. The thunder continued to roll outside, but inside, a different kind of electricity crackled. "Killian," Selina began, her voice barely a whisper. He wheeled closer to her, taking her hand again. This time there was no interruption, no professional distance, no pretense. "I know what I want," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Do you?" The storm threw shadows across their faces as they stood on the precipice of change. Everything they'd built, his empire, her career, their carefully maintained boundaries, trembled like leaves in the wind. In that moment, as lightning painted the sky and thunder shook the windows, they faced a truth bigger than recovery, stronger than professional ethics, more powerful than corporate boards. Sometimes the heart heals faster than the body, and love doesn't wait for convenient timing. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away old certainties, while inside, two souls stood at a crossroads, ready to either embrace or retreat from the storm that threatened to change everything. The morning after the storm dawned clear and cold, Seattle's skyline crisp against a newly washed sky. Selina sat in her car outside Killian's mansion, her hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Her professional mask felt fragile, like porcelain ready to shatter. Last night's words echoed in her mind. "I know what I want. Do you?" She hadn't answered him. Instead, she'd fled into the storm, driving home through sheets of rain that matched her internal turbulence. Now, in the harsh light of morning, she had to face the consequences of that moment. The security system recognized her fingerprint, letting her in with its usual quiet efficiency. She found Killian in the kitchen, a surprise that stopped her in her tracks. He sat in his wheelchair by the massive island, attempting to make coffee. "I can do that," she said automatically, moving toward the machine. "Can you?" His voice was soft, but pointed. "Or are you going to run from that too?" The words hit their mark. Selina's hands stilled on the coffee maker. "Mr. Rhodes, back to formalities." He wheeled around to face her. "After everything?" She turned to meet his gaze, struck by how the morning light carved shadows under his cheekbones, highlighting the intensity in his steel blue eyes. He looked tired, as if he'd spent the night wrestling with the same demons she had. "We need to talk about this," she said finally. "About boundaries, about professional ethics, about fear," he cut in. "Because that's what this is really about, isn't it?" "This isn't fear," she argued, but her voice wavered. "This is reality. You're my patient. I'm your nurse. There are lines that shouldn't be crossed." "Lines?" He laughed without humor. "I've spent my entire life drawing lines, building walls, maintaining control. Look where it got me. It got you an empire. An empire built on what? Control? Power? Do you know what I've learned in these past weeks, Selina?" He wheeled closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "I've learned that some things can't be controlled. Some things shouldn't be." The coffee maker beeped, making her jump. She busied herself with pouring 2 cups, using the mundane task to steady her nerves. When she handed him his coffee, their fingers brushed, sending electricity through her body. "The board," she began. "Can't dictate my heart," he finished, "or yours. It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" He set the coffee down untouched. "Tell me something, Selina. When you're helping me with physical therapy, when you're checking my vitals, when you're sitting with me through sleepless nights, is it just professional duty you feel?" Her silence was answer enough. "Your career matters," he continued, his voice softening. "Your dreams of opening your own rehabilitation center, I understand that, but don't use it as a shield against what's real." "And what is real, Killian?" The use of his first name slipped out before she could stop it. A patient falling for his nurse? A CEO risking his empire for... what? For love. The word hung between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Selina felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "Love," she repeated softly. "Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't build careers. Love doesn't heal," he challenged. "Isn't that what you've been teaching me all along? That healing isn't just about the body?" Before she could respond, his tablet chimed. Another board meeting, the real world intruding on their moment of truth. "Take the call," she said, stepping back. "We have therapy at 10. "Selina." His voice stopped her retreat. "We can't keep dancing around this." She turned back to him, taking in the strength in his features, the vulnerability in his eyes. "I know," she whispered, "but I don't know how to stop." The morning progressed in a haze of professional duties, tinged with unspoken emotions. During physical therapy, every touch felt charged, every silence pregnant with meaning. Killian was making remarkable progress, now able to take several steps without support. But it was the way he looked at her that made her breath catch, as if she were the real miracle in the room. Around noon, his private doctor arrived for a scheduled checkup. Dr. Anderson was a stern woman in her 50s who took her job very seriously. "Remarkable progress," she noted, reviewing Killian's charts. "Miss Hayes, your notes are exceptionally detailed." She paused, looking between them with shrewd eyes. "Perhaps too detailed." Selina felt her face flush. Even their medical records betrayed them, every careful observation reading like a love letter in disguise. After the doctor left, Killian found Selina in the garden, sitting on the bench where they sometimes did breathing exercises. The early afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold. "She knows," Selina said without turning around. "Everyone knows," he replied, wheeling up beside her. "We're the only ones still pretending. I could lose my license. I could lose my company." "Then why?" She turned to face him, tears threatening. "Why risk everything?" "Because some things are worth the risk." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "Because you've taught me that true strength isn't about control. It's about having the courage to let go." A breeze stirred the garden, carrying the scent of approaching spring. Selina looked at their intertwined fingers, his strong and certain, hers trembling slightly. "I've spent my whole life being strong," she whispered, "taking care of others, maintaining boundaries, staying professional. I don't know how to be vulnerable." "Then let me teach you," he said softly, "like you've taught me." The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and danger. In the distance, Seattle's bustling downtown reminded them of the world waiting to judge, to condemn, to separate. "The board meets tomorrow," Killian said finally. "They want me back in the office, back in control. Are you ready? Physically? Almost? Emotionally?" He squeezed her hand. "I'm ready for something entirely different." The sun continued its arc across the sky, casting their shadows long across the garden. Two people caught between duty and desire, profession and passion, control and surrender. "Tonight," Selina said suddenly, "come to my apartment for dinner, not as my patient, not as a CEO, just you." The words surprised them both. It was an invitation that crossed every line they'd drawn, every boundary they'd established. It was also, they both knew, inevitable. "What time?" His voice was husky with emotion. "7." She stood, reluctantly releasing his hand. "Bring wine and courage." As she walked away, Killian watched her go, understanding that they were standing on the edge of something that would either destroy them both or save them in ways neither had imagined possible. In her car later that afternoon, Selina caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was someone on the verge of either the biggest mistake of her life or its greatest triumph. The Seattle traffic crawled around her as she drove home, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. Tonight would change everything. Tonight, they would either find a way to bridge their two worlds or watch them collapse entirely. The sun began its descent over the city, painting the sky in shades of promise and warning. In a few hours, they would meet not as nurse and patient, but as man and woman. The price of truth was high, but the cost of denial, they were both learning, was even higher. Selina's apartment in Capitol Hill was a far cry from Killian's glass mansion. The converted Victorian had character, worn hardwood floors, high ceilings, and windows that caught the last rays of Seattle's sunset. She'd spent the afternoon trying to see it through his eyes, the vintage medical textbooks lining her shelves, the collection of soul and jazz vinyl records inherited from her father, the potted herbs thriving on her kitchen windowsill. At precisely 7 o'clock, her doorbell rang. Selina smoothed down her emerald green dress, casual enough for a home dinner, elegant enough to make a statement. When she opened the door, her breath caught. Killian sat in his wheelchair, but something about him was different. Gone was the corporate armor, replaced by a charcoal cashmere sweater and dark jeans. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run his hands through it nervously. In one hand, he held a bottle of wine, in the other a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Not roses," he said, offering her the flowers. "I thought you might appreciate something less controlled." The gesture touched her deeply. "They're perfect," she managed, stepping back to let him enter. Like a garden that grew itself. His eyes took in her apartment, and she found herself watching his reaction. The space was modest but warm, filled with personal touches that spoke of a life well lived. "It's very you," he said finally, wheeling toward her kitchen island. "Real, unpretentious." "Is that a compliment from the man who lives in a glass palace?" She took the wine, a vintage that probably cost more than her weekly salary. "The palace feels empty lately," he admitted, watching as she arranged the wildflowers in a mason jar. Too much glass, not enough soul. Selina moved around her kitchen with practiced ease, finishing the preparations for their dinner. She'd chosen to make soul food, her mother's recipes, passed down through generations. "You cooked," Killian observed, surprised. "I'm full of surprises, Mr. Rhodes." She smiled, setting a plate before him. "My mother always said food should tell a story." The aroma of slow-cooked comfort filled the space between them. Killian looked down at his plate with genuine curiosity. "Tell me the story of this meal." "This is my grandmother's recipe for braised short ribs," she explained, sitting across from him. "The kind of dish that takes all day to cook, teaching you that some things can't be rushed. The cornbread is my mother's recipe. She said it's like love, needs both sweetness and heat to work right." Killian took a bite, and his eyes widened in appreciation. "This is incredible. Different from your usual five-star restaurants?" "Better," he said simply. "This has history, memory, love." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Selina poured the wine, buying time to steady her nerves. "Tell me about your mother," Killian said suddenly. "You speak of her often, but always in fragments." Selina's hand stilled on her wine glass. "She's the strongest person I know, not just because she raised me alone after my father passed, but because she taught me that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about how you put yourself back together. Is that why you became a nurse?" "Partly." She met his eyes across the candle-lit space. "I wanted to help people find their way back to themselves, like she did, like you're doing now. With your help," he added softly. The conversation flowed as naturally as the wine, moving from family histories to dreams, from childhood memories to future hopes. Selina found herself telling him about her father's last days in the hospital, how watching the nurses care for him had shaped her calling. They didn't just treat his illness, she explained, emotion coloring her voice. They treated his spirit. That's when I understood. Healing is an art as much as a science. And you're an artist, Killian said, reaching across the table to take her hand. You've been painting life back into my world one day at a time. The touch of his hand sent electricity through her body. In the soft candlelight, all their carefully constructed barriers seemed to melt away. Dance with me, he said suddenly. Killian, your legs are strong enough for one slow dance. He pushed back from the table, determination in his eyes. Trust me, like I trust you. Heart pounding, Selina moved to her father's old record player. The smooth sounds of John Coltrane filled the apartment as she selected a ballad. Killian rose carefully from his wheelchair, his movements strong but measured. When she stepped into his arms, the world seemed to shift on its axis. One of his hands found her waist, the other clasped hers gently. They swayed together, barely moving but lost in the moment. This is crazy, she whispered against his chest. This is real, he countered, his voice rough with emotion. Everything else, the hospital rules, the board's expectations, society's boundaries, that's the illusion. She pulled back slightly to look at him, taking in the intensity of his gaze, the way the candlelight played across his features. We could lose everything, or gain everything. His hand moved to cup her face. I'm tired of living behind walls, Selina, even glass ones. The music swelled around them, Coltrane's saxophone speaking of love and longing. Selina felt tears threatening as she recognized the truth in his words. In this moment, in her heart. My mother would say we're playing with fire, she murmured. Your mother sounds wise. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But sometimes fire is exactly what we need to forge something new. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home and embarking on an adventure all at once. His lips were gentle but certain, speaking of promises and possibilities. Selina melted into him, finally surrendering to what they'd both known was inevitable. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and control dissolving in the heat between them. His hands tangled in her curls, freeing them from their careful arrangement. Her fingers gripped his sweater, anchoring herself to this moment, this truth. When they finally parted, both breathless, the world had changed. There was no going back to professional distance, to practiced neutrality. The lines they'd drawn had been crossed. The walls had crumbled. Stay, she whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. I shouldn't, he replied, though his arms tightened around her. According to whom? She challenged, her honey-colored eyes meeting his steel-blue ones. The board? The medical board? Society? According to the man who doesn't want to rush this, he said softly. Who wants to do this right? Who wants to build something real with you, not just a moment of passion? His words, so honest and vulnerable, made her love him more. Because it was love, she could admit that now, here in the sanctuary of her apartment, with Coltrane playing and candles burning low. Tomorrow, he continued, stroking her cheek, I face the board. I need to do that with a clear head. But knowing this exists, knowing you're here, knowing what's possible, that gives me strength I never knew I needed. They stayed wrapped in each other's arms until the record ended, swaying slightly to music that had faded into memory. When Killian finally returned to his wheelchair, it wasn't defeat. It was a promise to heal, to grow stronger, to build something lasting. At her door, he kissed her again, softer this time, but no less meaningful. Thank you, he murmured against her lips. For what? For showing me that the strongest walls are the ones we choose to break down ourselves. After he left, Selina stood at her window, watching his car disappear into the Seattle night. Her apartment felt different now, charged with memory and possibility. Tomorrow would bring challenges, the board meeting, professional consequences, difficult decisions, but tonight had brought truth, and truth, once spoken, couldn't be unspoken. She touched her lips, still feeling his kiss, and smiled. Her mother was right. Love did need both sweetness and heat to work right, and whatever fire they were playing with, it was already forging something beautiful, something real, something worth every risk. The morning of the board meeting dawned with Seattle's characteristic grey skies, but Killian Thomas Rhodes felt anything but grey. Last night's kisses still lingered on his lips, Selina's touch still ghosted across his skin. He dressed with particular care, a custom-tailored charcoal suit that spoke of power, a deep blue tie that matched his eyes. When Selina arrived for his morning therapy session, the air between them crackled with new awareness. She wore her professional navy scrubs, But her honey-colored eyes held secrets only he knew. "Ready for this?" she asked, helping him with his final preparations. "For the board?" "Always." He caught her hand as she adjusted his tie. "For you?" "Never. You take my breath away every time." A blush colored her cheeks, but her voice remained steady. "Focus, Mr. Rhodes. Today isn't about us. Everything is about us now." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing it softly. "But you're right. First, we face the lions." The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room of Rhodes International Hotel's headquarters. Killian insisted on walking in, using a cane rather than the wheelchair. Selina stayed close, professionally distant but present. The boardroom fell silent as they entered. 12 pairs of eyes watched as Killian made his way to the head of the table, his movements deliberate and strong. Selina took her position by the wall, a medical professional observing her patient's performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," Killian's voice filled the room with familiar authority. "Thank you for your patience during my recovery. Let's discuss the future of our company." For the next hour, he commanded the room like the CEO he was, presenting plans, addressing concerns, demonstrating his unwavering leadership. But when the CFO began discussing stock prices and investor confidence, the atmosphere shifted. "The market is nervous, Killian," the CFO stated bluntly. "Your accident, your extended absence, the rumors about your personal situation, it's affecting investor confidence." Killian's hand tightened on his cane, but his voice remained steady. "My personal situation? Your relationship with your nurse?" The words came from Dominic Warner, the oldest board member. "It's inappropriate, unprofessional, a liability." Selina felt the blood drain from her face. Killian's expression hardened into granite. "My recovery is progressing ahead of schedule," he said coldly, "thanks largely to Miss Hayes's exceptional care." "We're not questioning her professional capabilities," Warner continued. "We're questioning your judgment. A CEO cannot afford scandal." "Scandal?" Killian's laugh was sharp. "Is that what we're calling human connection these days?" "We're calling it a risk," the CFO interjected. "One the company cannot afford." Killian rose slowly from his chair, standing to his full height. The room held its breath. "Let me be clear." His voice was quiet, but carried to every corner. "I built this company from the ground up. I've sacrificed everything for it. Health, relationships, any semblance of a personal life. And in return, I've given you record profits, global expansion, and unparalleled success." He took a step forward, then another, his cane forgotten against the table. "But my accident taught me something valuable. Success without meaning is just numbers on a page. Power without purpose is empty. I nearly died thinking I had everything, only to realize I had nothing that truly mattered." "Killian," Warner warned, "don't let emotion cloud your judgment." "Emotion?" Killian's eyes blazed. "Emotion is what makes us human. It's what connects us to our clients, our staff, our purpose. And yes, I have feelings for Selina Hayes. Deep, real, transformative feelings. She hasn't just healed my body, she's awakened my soul." Selina felt tears threatening, but held them back. This was his moment, his battle. "So here's what's going to happen," Killian continued, his voice gaining strength. "I'm returning to full-time duties next week. I will continue to lead this company with the same dedication and vision that built it. But I will do it as a whole person, not just a CEO, but a man who has learned that true strength lies in vulnerability, and real power comes from the courage to love." "The board won't accept this," Warner stated flatly. "Then the board can vote me out." Killian's smile was dangerous. "But remember, I still own controlling interest, and I'd rather lose my position than lose my soul again." He turned to Selina, his eyes softening as they met hers. "Miss Hayes, would you help me with my cane? I believe we're done here." The boardroom erupted in chaos as they left, voices raised in argument and protest. But Killian didn't look back. His hand found Selina's in the elevator, squeezing it gently. "That was either very brave or very foolish," she whispered. "Sometimes they're the same thing." He pulled her closer. "I meant every word." Back in his office, with Seattle's skyline sprawling before them, reality began to sink in. Selina paced while Killian sat in his chair watching her. "They'll try to destroy you," she said finally. "Both of us. My career. We'll be protected," he interrupted. "I've already spoken with lawyers. There's nothing unethical about two consenting adults finding love, even if it began in unusual circumstances." "Love?" She stopped pacing, turning to face him. "Yes, love." He wheeled closer to her. "I love you, Selina Hayes, not just for healing me, but for showing me what real strength looks like, for teaching me that control isn't power, courage is. She knelt before his chair, taking his hands in hers. I love you too, she whispered, but I'm scared. This is bigger than us. No, he touched her cheek gently. This is exactly our size. Everything else, the board, the company, society's expectations, that's what's oversized. We're just two people choosing love over fear. A knock at the door interrupted them. Elliot entered, his expression grave but his eyes twinkling. Quite a show, he said, settling into a chair. The board's in an uproar, stock's already dropping, and you two look happier than I've ever seen either of you. Uncle, Killian began, but Elliot raised a hand. Let me finish. I came to tell you I'm proud of you, nephew. Not for building an empire. Any ruthless businessman can do that. I'm proud of you for finding the courage to build something far more precious, a life worth living. Selina felt tears finally spill over. Elliot reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. What's this? Killian asked. Deed to my property in Portland, the one with all the roses. Elliot smiled. Consider it an investment in whatever future you two choose to build. Sometimes we need a fresh start to grow something beautiful. Outside, Seattle's eternal rain had begun again, washing the windows of Killian's glass empire. But inside, something warm and bright was blooming, something no board meeting could diminish, no stock price could measure. Whatever comes next, Killian said, pulling Selina close, we face it together. She nodded against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. They had chosen love over empire, truth over power, heart over control, and somehow that felt like the biggest victory of all. The media storm broke the next morning. Headlines screamed across Seattle's newspapers and business journals. Rhodes International CEO's scandal, love or liability, Rhodes's recovery romance, board threatens vote of no confidence. Selina's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from the nursing board, former colleagues and reporters hungry for a story. In Killian's mansion, they sat together watching the chaos unfold on multiple screens. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. Investors, board members, business partners, all demanding explanations. Your stock's down 15%, Selina said quietly, reading from her tablet. It'll recover. Killian's voice was calm as he stood by the window, his cane forgotten by the chair. Physical therapy had made him stronger, but it was love that made him stand tall now. The nursing board wants to review my license. Her voice trembled slightly. They're claiming ethical violations. Killian turned from the window, crossing the room to her with steady steps. Let them review. We've done nothing wrong. Love isn't a violation. It's a healing force. Before she could respond, the security system chimed. Dr. Anderson entered, her expression grave. I've been called to testify before the Medical Ethics Board, she announced without preamble. They want my official opinion on the nature of your relationship during treatment. Selina felt her heart sink, but Killian's hand found hers, squeezing gently. And what will you tell them, Doctor? He asked. Dr. Anderson's stern face softened slightly. The truth, that I observed two people healing each other in ways medicine can't measure, that Miss Hayes's care was exemplary, professional and transformative, and that love, when it appears, doesn't follow institutional guidelines. Tears sprang to Selina's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, the doctor warned. This won't be easy. The board is determined to make an example of you both. After she left, Selina moved to the therapy room, needing the familiar space to think. Killian followed, watching as she absently organized equipment that was already perfectly arranged. We could leave, he said suddenly. Take Elliot's offer. Start fresh in Portland. Run away. She turned to face him. Is that what you want? I want you. His voice was fierce with conviction. The company, the board, my position, none of it matters without you. It matters, she countered gently. Your empire isn't just about you anymore. Thousands of people depend on Rhodes International. We can't just abandon them because love complicated things. Before he could respond, his tablet lit up with an urgent message. The board had called an emergency session for tomorrow morning. A vote of no confidence was on the agenda. They're moving faster than expected, he muttered, scanning the details. What are our options? The word "our" made his heart swell. Even facing professional ruin, she thought in terms of we, not I. I could step down voluntarily, he said thoughtfully. Install a new CEO of my choosing, maintain controlling interest but remove myself from daily operations. Give up everything you've built? Selina shook her head. I won't let you sacrifice your life's work for me. For us, he corrected. And maybe it's not a sacrifice, maybe it's an evolution. The security system chimed again. This time it was Elliot, looking more serious than they'd ever seen him. "The roses are blooming in Portland," he said, his usual cryptic style replaced with urgency. "The property's ready whenever you are." "We're not running, Uncle." Killian's voice was firm. "No?" Elliot settled into a chair. "Sometimes strategic retreat isn't running. Sometimes it's about choosing the right battlefield." Selina moved to stand by the window, watching Seattle's skyline shimmer in the afternoon light. "This is our battlefield," she said quietly. "Here, now, together." Killian joined her, his movement strong and steady, a testament to her healing touch and his determination. "Then we fight, but not by their rules." "What do you mean?" Elliot leaned forward, intrigued. "The board wants to vote tomorrow? Fine. But first, they'll hear our truth. Not through lawyers or press releases, but from us. Raw, real, undeniable." He turned to Selina, taking both her hands in his. "Come with me tomorrow. Stand beside me. Let them see what real strength looks like. They'll twist it," she warned. "Use our love against us. Let them try." His smile was fierce and tender at once. "Some things are beyond twisting, beyond breaking." Elliot watched them with knowing eyes. "The roses in Portland will wait," he said softly. "Some battles need to be fought before new gardens can grow." As evening fell, they gathered in Killian's study, planning their strategy for tomorrow. But strategy seemed inadequate for what they faced. This wasn't about corporate maneuvering or professional ethics anymore. This was about something larger, the right to love, to heal, to grow beyond the boundaries others set. "Tell me again," Selina said as they stood by the windows, watching night claim the city. "Tell me this is worth it." Killian turned her to face him, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. "When I was lying in that hospital bed, I thought I'd lost everything. My mobility, my control, my purpose. Then you walked in, and slowly, day by day, you showed me that I hadn't lost anything. I just hadn't found what really mattered yet." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs gently wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You didn't just heal my body, Selina. You healed my soul, taught me that real strength isn't in controlling everything, but in having the courage to let love lead the way. Even if it costs us everything?" she whispered. "Everything we lose makes room for something better to grow." He smiled, echoing her own wisdom back to her. "Isn't that what you taught me during therapy?" She laughed through her tears, reaching up to touch his face. "Using my own words against me, Mr. Rhodes. Every word you've ever said has made me better," he murmured, drawing her close. "Tomorrow we show them that love isn't a liability. It's the greatest asset anyone can have." Outside, Seattle's lights twinkled like stars fallen to earth, while inside 2 hearts beat in perfect rhythm, preparing for the battle ahead. Tomorrow would bring either victory or defeat, but tonight, in each other's arms, they were already winners. Elliot left them there, silhouetted against the city lights, 2 souls merged into one shadow. As he drove home, he smiled, knowing that sometimes the greatest empires aren't built of glass and steel, but of love and courage. The night deepened around the mansion, wrapping it in velvet darkness. Inside, Killian and Selina remained entwined, drawing strength from each other, preparing for whatever dawn might bring. Their love story had begun in healing, and would face its greatest test in fighting, not for an empire of business, but for an empire of the heart. The morning of the final board meeting dawned with unexpected clarity. Seattle's perpetual grey had given way to brilliant sunshine, as if nature itself was taking sides. Selina stood in Killian's bedroom, helping him dress for battle in a suit that spoke of both power and transformation, deep navy blue, impeccably tailored, but softened by a tie the exact shade of her eyes. "Your last official act as my nurse," he said softly, as she adjusted his tie. "No," she corrected, smoothing the silk against his chest. "My first official act as your partner." The word held weight, promise, future. They'd spent the night talking, planning, dreaming, about Portland's roses and Seattle's skyscrapers, about healing centers and hotel empires, about love that transforms everything it touches. "Ready?" he asked, standing tall without his cane. "Together," she answered, taking his hand. The Rhodes International boardroom was packed when they arrived. Board members, major shareholders, even some press had been allowed in. The vote of no confidence had become a public spectacle. Dominic Warner sat at the head of the table, a position that should have been Killian's. "Mr. Rhodes," Warner's voice dripped false concern. "Are you sure you want to do this publicly? For everyone's sake, a quiet resignation might be—" "My father built this company on transparency," Killian interrupted, his voice carrying to every corner. I've expanded it on the same principle. Today will be no different. He remained standing, Selina beside him, their hands clasped openly on the polished table. The room buzzed with whispers and camera clicks. Then let's begin, Warner said grimly. The board has gathered to... Before you start, Killian's voice cut through like steel wrapped in silk. I have something to say to all of you. He released Selina's hand and walked, strong, steady, healed, to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Seattle spread before him, the empire he'd built glittering in the morning sun. 6 months ago, I lay in a hospital bed, broken, not just physically but spiritually. I had built this company into a global force, but I'd lost myself in the process. I thought power meant control, success meant sacrifice, leadership meant loneliness. He turned to face the room, his eyes finding Selina's. Then I met someone who taught me that true power lies in vulnerability, that real success is measured in moments of genuine connection, that the greatest leadership comes from having the courage to follow your heart. This is all very touching, Warner interjected, but sentiment doesn't drive stock prices. Doesn't it? Killian smiled. What drives our occupancy rates? Why do guests choose our hotels? It's not just luxury or location. It's the feeling they get when they walk through our doors. The sense of being truly cared for, truly seen. He moved to stand behind Selina, placing his hands on her shoulders. Selina Hayes didn't just heal my body. She showed me what our company could be if we led with heart instead of just numbers, if we valued human connection as much as corporate expansion. The board's concern, Warner pressed, is about professional ethics, about control. Selina spoke for the first time, her voice clear and strong, about maintaining an image that values power over humanity. But healing, whether it's a person or a company, requires something more. It requires trust, vulnerability, and yes, love. The room fell silent at her words. In that silence, the door opened. Elliot entered, followed by Dr. Anderson, and surprisingly, several familiar faces, hotel staff from executives to housekeepers, all coming to stand behind Killian and Selina. What is this? Warner demanded. This is Rhodes International, Killian answered simply. Not just the board, not just the shareholders, but the people who make our success possible. People who understand that the greatest luxury we can offer isn't thread count or wine lists. It's genuine care. He moved to address the entire room. I'm not stepping down, I'm stepping up. Into a new vision for this company, one that balances profit with purpose, expansion with compassion. And Miss Hayes? Someone called out. What about the ethical concerns? I'm resigning from my position as Killian's nurse, Selina announced calmly. Not because our love is wrong, but because it's right. Because sometimes healing leads to something deeper, something transformative. We're opening a new division, Killian continued. The Hayes Rhodes Wellness Initiative, combining luxury hospitality with revolutionary healing programs. Not just physical therapy, but whole-person healing. Selina will lead it, bringing her expertise in healthcare to transform how we care for our guests and staff alike. The room erupted in mixed reactions, shock, interest, resistance. But before Warner could respond, another voice rang out. I move to table the vote of no confidence, a younger board member stood, and propose instead a vote on this new initiative. I second, another voice called. Warner's face reddened. This is irregular, unprecedented. Like love often is, Elliot interjected smoothly. Sometimes irregular and unprecedented are exactly what we need to grow. The vote that followed wasn't even close. The new initiative passed with overwhelming support. The same board that had gathered to remove Killian now energized by a vision that married prosperity with purpose. As the room gradually emptied, Killian and Selina remained by the windows, watching their reflected images merge with Seattle's skyline. The Hayes Rhodes Wellness Initiative, she teased softly. When did you plan that? Somewhere between falling in love with you and learning to walk again. He turned her to face him. Say you'll build it with me. This new empire, not of glass and steel, but of healing and hope. Here in Seattle, she asked, or among Elliot's roses in Portland? Both. Neither. Wherever love leads us. He dropped to one knee, making the boardroom gasp again. Marry me, Selina Hayes. Be my partner in everything. Life, love, business, healing. Let's show the world that the greatest strength lies in having the courage to love without limits. Tears sparkled in her honey-colored eyes as she pulled him to his feet. Yes, she whispered against his lips. To everything. Always. Their kiss drew applause from the remaining audience, but they barely noticed. They were lost in their own world, where love had healed not just bodies and hearts, but souls and futures. Later that evening, they stood in Killian's garden, soon to be their garden. Seattle's lights twinkled below, while stars emerged above. "Scared?" he asked, holding her close. "Terrified," she admitted with a smile, "but the good kind of terrified. The kind that means we're about to do something amazing." "We already have," he murmured into her hair. "We've proved that love is the greatest healer of all." As night wrapped around them like a velvet embrace, they stood entwined, two souls who had found each other in the midst of broken glass and broken dreams, and built something stronger than an empire. They'd built a love story that would heal not just them, but countless others through their shared vision. Above them, Seattle's eternal rain began again, soft and cleansing, but they didn't seek shelter. They stood together in the gentle downpour, letting it wash away the old and baptize the new. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about avoiding the rain. They're about learning to dance in it, together. 1 year later, the Portland sunrise painted Elliot's rose garden in shades of gold and pink. Morning dew sparkled on countless blooms, their petals unfurling to greet the day. In the center of this floral paradise, a small gathering of white chairs faced an elegant arch woven with climbing roses, white, pink, and the rare blue roses Elliot had cultivated specially for this day. Selina stood at the window of the renovated farmhouse, watching early light dance across the garden. Her wedding dress, simple, elegant, with delicate lace that echoed the pattern of rose vines, caught the morning rays. Her curls were adorned with tiny white flowers, and in her hands she held her father's worn notebook, its pages now filled with both his music notes and her journey of love. "Your mother would be so proud," Elliot said softly, appearing in the doorway. He'd traded his usual worn leather jacket for a sharp tuxedo, though his eyes still held their familiar wisdom. Both of them would be. Selina turned, tears threatening to spill. "They're here," she whispered. "In every rose, every note of music, every moment of love." Across the garden, in another part of the sprawling farmhouse, Killian adjusted his bow tie with steady hands. No cane in sight. His movements were strong and sure, a testament to both physical healing and love's transformative power. The past year had brought changes neither could have imagined. The Hayes Roads Wellness Initiative had revolutionized luxury hospitality, combining world-class hotels with innovative healing programs. Their first center in Seattle had a waiting list months long, with plans for expansion already in motion. But their greatest achievement wasn't measured in profit margins or industry awards. It was in the lives they'd touched, the hearts they'd helped heal, the way they'd proved that love could transform not just two people, but an entire corporate culture. The garden filled slowly with their chosen family, hotel staff who'd become friends, patients who'd become believers in their vision, board members who'd switched from skeptics to supporters. Dr. Anderson sat in the front row, her stern face softened by genuine joy. As the string quartet began playing a soulful rendition of one of her father's compositions, Selina took her first step into the garden. The guests rose, but she saw only Killian waiting for her under the rose-covered arch. His eyes held the same wonder they'd shown that first night in her apartment, when they'd danced to Coltrane and let love break down their walls. Their vows were simple, but profound. They spoke of healing and being healed, of strength found in surrender, of empires built on love instead of power. When Killian promised to dance with her in every storm, Selina's tears finally fell, matching the morning dew on the roses around them. "By the power of love that heals all wounds," the officiant pronounced, "I now declare you husband and wife." Their kiss was met with applause and the soft scatter of rose petals, but they barely noticed. They were lost in each other, in the miracle of their journey, in the promise of their shared future. The reception unfolded like a dream in Elliot's garden. Tables set among the roses, music floating on the breeze, love evident in every detail. During their first dance, Killian held Selina close, moving with the strength and grace she'd helped him reclaim. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Beyond words," she replied, then smiled, "though the board might have opinions about that." "The board," he laughed, "is too busy enjoying the success of our wellness centers to have opinions about anything else." It was true. Their vision of combining luxury with healing had tapped into something the hospitality industry hadn't known it needed. People came for the five-star amenities, but stayed for the soul-deep transformation they found. As evening painted the garden in soft twilight, Elliot raised his glass. "To love that heals," he toasted, and to gardens that grow wild and free. Later, after the guests had gone and stars emerged above the roses, Killian and Selina walked hand in hand through the garden. Their new home, a perfect blend of modern elegance and natural beauty, waited on the property's edge, overlooking both Portland's lights and Elliot's endless roses. "Remember when you first came to my mansion?" Killian asked, pulling her close. "All steel and glass and control." "How could I forget? You were the most difficult patient I'd ever met." She touched his face tenderly. "And the only one who stole my heart. You stole mine first," he countered. "With your strength, your grace, your ability to see past my walls." Above them, a soft rain began to fall, nature's blessing on their union. But unlike that first night in Seattle, they didn't seek shelter. Instead, they began to dance, there among the rain-kissed roses. "Our empire looks different than I imagined," Killian mused, twirling her gently. "Better," Selina agreed, "because it's built on love." They danced until the stars faded, celebrating not just their wedding day but the miracle of their journey. From broken CEO and determined nurse to partners in every sense, they had created something remarkable, a love story that continued to heal others as it had healed them. The roses swayed around them, witnesses to a truth they'd discovered together, that the greatest healing comes not from power or control, but from the courage to let love lead the way. And in their garden of second chances, among blooms both wild and cultivated, their love continued to grow, healing hearts and transforming lives, one dance in the rain at a time. The end. If you were in Killian's shoes, would you choose to fight for love even though you could lose the entire empire you've built, or would you maintain a professional attitude, following the rules of the board, to preserve your company and reputation? In a world where status and power seem to be everything, would you have the courage to choose your heart? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time. A distracted employee accidentally bumped into an elegant man. He was fascinated by her beauty. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The autumn morning wrapped around Boston like a worn blanket, familiar yet somehow different today. Brianna Monroe's fingers tightened around her coffee cup, black, 2 sugars, as she hurried through the quiet streets toward Wellness Bridge Physical Therapy. The clinic's modest sign came into view, its letters slightly faded against the brick building that housed countless stories of healing and hope. At 23, Brianna carried herself with a presence that turned heads, though she remained oblivious to the effect she had on others. Her natural curls caught the early morning light, bouncing with each determined step. Today, like most rushed mornings, she'd pulled them back into a makeshift bun, a few rebellious strands framing her face. Her dark brown eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the street as she walked, her mind already running through the day's tasks. Her outfit, high-waisted jeans, a structured navy blouse, and her favorite gold hoop earrings, reflected her careful balance between professionalism and personality. The clothes were chosen with precision from her modest wardrobe, each piece a testament to her ability to make something simple look elegant. "Morning, Mrs. Davidson," Brianna called out to the elderly woman who always arrived early for her 8 a.m. session. The familiar routine of unlocking the clinic's door, switching on lights, and booting up the ancient computer system followed like a well-rehearsed dance. The reception desk was her command center, though sometimes it felt more like a fortress. From here, she juggled impatient patients, temperamental insurance companies, and doctors who barely acknowledged her existence. Her fingers moved automatically to straighten the stack of forms in the top drawer, a nervous habit that surfaced whenever her mind was troubled. Today, that trouble had a name: bills. Her mother's latest medical tests had arrived yesterday, along with their accompanying costs. The numbers danced mockingly in her head as she arranged the day's appointment folders. Each manila folder represented another hour she couldn't spend at her mother's bedside, another day postponing her own dreams of returning to school. Already reorganizing those drawers? The warm voice of Dr. Reeves, the clinic's owner, broke through her thoughts. The older woman leaned against the reception desk, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "You know, one of these days, You're going to have to tell me your filing system secrets. Brianna managed a small smile. No secrets, Dr. Reeves. Just good old-fashioned Virgo neurosis. Well, whatever it is, it keeps this place running. Dr. Reeves paused, her expression shifting to something more serious. Did you think about what we discussed? About the administrative position opening up? The question made Brianna's heart skip. She had been preparing for months, taking online courses in healthcare administration during her lunch breaks, studying management techniques after her mother fell asleep at night. Yes, ma'am. I've updated my resume and... The clinic's door chimed, cutting through their conversation. Brianna looked up and time seemed to stop. He filled the doorway like a shadow coming to life. Tall, remarkably so, with broad shoulders and an athlete's build barely contained by his crisp white shirt and tailored pants. But it was his eyes that caught her off guard, green-gray, intense, carrying a weight that seemed to pull at something deep in her chest. His dark hair was perfectly trimmed, his full beard neat and professional, yet there was something raw about his presence, something that didn't quite fit with his polished exterior. Mr. Hawthorne, Doctor. Reeves stepped forward, her voice warming with welcome. Right on time. Brianna's mind raced to catch up. Marcus Hawthorne, the new physiotherapist. Of course, she'd processed his paperwork last week, but somehow the name on those forms hadn't prepared her for the reality of the man himself. She stood, gathering the orientation materials she'd prepared, but her heel caught on the chair's wheel. The world tilted. Papers flew. Her coffee cup wobbled precariously on the desk's edge. And then strong hands were steadying her, catching her before she could fall. Time crystallized in that moment. His hands were warm through the fabric of her blouse, solid and sure. The scent of his cologne, something clean and understated, mixed with her spilled coffee. Their eyes met, and Brianna felt something shift in the air between them, like the moment before lightning strikes. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to... She started, but her words tangled as she noticed the coffee stain spreading across his pristine white shirt. It's fine, he said, his voice deep and quiet, with an edge of something she couldn't quite read. His hands dropped away from her arms as if burned, and the loss of contact felt strangely significant. Brianna, why don't you show Mr. Hawthorne to his office while I grab him a spare shirt from the storage room? Doctor, Reeves suggested, already moving toward the back of the clinic. I think we still have some from the clinic's promotional event last spring. Brianna nodded, grateful for the moment to compose herself. She bent to gather the scattered papers, very aware of how he stepped back, maintaining a careful distance. When she straightened, she found him watching her with an unreadable expression. This way, Mr. Hawthorne, she managed, her professional mask sliding back into place. She led him down the corridor, past treatment rooms where early morning sunlight painted rectangles on the floor. Your office is at the end of the hall. We've updated the equipment according to your specifications. He followed in silence, his footsteps measured and controlled. Everything about him seemed controlled, she realized, like someone who had learned the hard way what happened when things spun out of orbit. At his office door, she turned to hand him the orientation packet. Your schedule for today is light, just 2 patients this afternoon. Dr. Reeves wanted to give you time to settle in. Their fingers brushed as he took the papers, and Brianna felt that same electric awareness spark between them. Thank you, Ms. Monroe. His voice was formal, distant, but his eyes lingered on her face for a moment too long. Then he was gone, the office door closing with a soft click that seemed to echo in the empty hallway. Brianna stood there for a moment, her heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm. Then she straightened her shoulders and walked back to her desk, where reality waited in the form of ringing phones and insurance forms. But as she settled into her chair, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in her carefully ordered world. Like a book knocked slightly off-center on a shelf, or a picture frame tilted just enough to catch the eye. Nothing obvious, nothing dramatic, just the quiet certainty that things would never be quite the same. She opened her drawer to reorganize the forms again, finding comfort in their familiar order. Outside her window, Boston was waking up, the street filling with people rushing toward their own stories. But here, in this moment, Brianna Monroe had the strange feeling that hers was just beginning. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that down the hall Marcus Hawthorne stood at his office window, staring at nothing, his fingers absently tracing the coffee stain on his shirt. And for the first time in a very long time, the weight of his grief felt just a little lighter, though he wasn't ready to understand why. The evening light was fading when Brianna finally allowed herself to exhale. The clinic had emptied, save for the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the occasional shuffle of papers from Dr. Reeves's office. Her fingers moved methodically over the keyboard, finishing the day's insurance claims, but her mind kept drifting to the closed door at the end of the hallway. Marcus Hawthorne had spent his first day moving like a ghost through the clinic, speaking only when necessary, his patients responding to his quiet authority with a mix of respect and curiosity. She'd watched him from the corner of her eye, noting how he seemed to carry silence with him like a shield. The vibration of her phone pulled her attention away from her thoughts. Tasha's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by 3 dancing emojis. "Girl, you better not still be at that desk." Tasha's voice crackled through the speaker, full of life and warning. "It's almost 7. Brianna glanced at the clock, guilt settling in her stomach. "I'm just finishing up. Mom's nurse is there until 8. Tasha's skepticism was palpable, and it has nothing to do with trying to avoid telling me about the new doctor everyone's talking about. Physical therapist." Brianna corrected automatically, then cursed under her breath as Tasha's triumphant laugh filled the line. "So there is something to tell. Spill it. Is he as fine as Mrs. Rodriguez from the morning shift claims? She texted me saying he looks like he walked straight out of a magazine." Brianna's eyes drifted to the hallway again. "He's professional." "Professional?" Tasha's voice rose an octave. "That's all you're giving me? After I spent my entire lunch break hearing about how this man has arms like—" "I spilled coffee on him," Brianna interrupted, heat rising to her cheeks at the memory. "First thing this morning, all over his white shirt." The silence on the other end lasted exactly 2 seconds before Tasha burst into laughter. "Only you, B. Only you could meet a fine man and baptize him in caffeine within the first minute. It's not funny. I looked like a complete—" Brianna's voice caught as movement in her peripheral vision made her freeze. Marcus stood in the hallway, his broad frame silhouetted against the dim evening light. Their eyes met, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. "I'll call you back," she whispered into the phone, ignoring Tasha's protests as she ended the call. Marcus approached her desk with that measured walk of his, each step deliberate as if he was counting them in his head. He'd changed into the clinic's logo shirt after the morning's incident, a simple grey polo that somehow made him look even more imposing. "Ms. Monroe," he said, his voice low and controlled, "I wanted to return these before leaving." He placed a stack of patient files on her desk, each one annotated with precise handwriting. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne." She reached for the files, careful not to let their fingers brush. "How was your first day?" Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps at the personal nature of the question. "Productive," he answered after a pause. Then, as if the word wasn't enough, he added, "Different from my last clinic." It was the most he'd said to her all day. Brianna found herself wanting to hold on to this moment, to unravel the layers of meaning beneath his careful words. "Different can be good," she offered softly. His eyes met hers again, and this time there was something else there, a vulnerability that made her heart skip. "Sometimes," he agreed, his voice barely above a whisper. The sound of Dr. Reeves's office door opening broke the spell between them. Marcus stepped back, his walls visibly rising again. "Good evening, Miss Monroe." "Good evening, Mr. Hawthorne." She watched him leave, his shoulders straight, his steps never faltering. Only when the front door closed behind him did she realize she'd been holding her breath. "He's carrying a lot." Dr. Reeves's voice made her jump. The older woman stood beside her desk, her eyes gentle with understanding. "What do you mean?" Dr. Reeves settled into the chair beside Brianna's desk, her movement slow with end-of-day fatigue. Marcus was one of the most promising therapists in his field, published papers, spoke at conferences. Then his wife died in a car accident last year. He took a leave of absence, disappeared completely. When he applied here, I almost couldn't believe it. The information hit Brianna like a physical blow. Suddenly, everything about him made sense. The controlled movements, the careful distance, the weight in his eyes. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Of course not. It's not something he talks about." Dr. Reeves patted Brianna's hand. "I'm only telling you because you'll be working closely with him and, well, sometimes understanding helps." Brianna nodded, her throat tight with emotions she couldn't name. "Thank you for letting me know." "Just—" Dr. Reeves stood, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "Be patient with him. He's still finding his way back." After Dr. Reeves left, Brianna sat in the growing darkness, her mind full of new understanding. The coffee incident replayed in her head, his steady hands catching her, the way he'd pulled back as if burned. She thought of her own carefully constructed walls, built from years of putting everyone else's needs before her own. Her phone buzzed again, a text from the nurse reminding her that her mother had taken her evening medication. Reality crashed back in, and Brianna began gathering her things. As she locked up the clinic, she couldn't help glancing down the street, wondering which direction he had gone, whether he too was heading home to an empty apartment filled with memories. The bus ride home was a blur of streetlights and thoughts she couldn't quiet. When she finally walked through her front door, the nurse greeted her with a tired smile. "She's had a good day," the nurse reported, gathering her coat. "Ate well, did her exercises. She's been asking for you." Brianna found her mother in the living room, wrapped in her favorite blanket, the TV playing softly in the background. "Hey, Mama, there's my girl." Her mother's smile was weak but genuine. "You're late today." "New therapist started at the clinic, lots of paperwork." Brianna settled onto the couch, automatically reaching to check her mother's temperature, to adjust the blanket around her shoulders. Her mother's knowing eyes studied her face. And what? "And there's something different about you today. I can see it." Brianna thought of Marcus's eyes, of the way the air seemed to change when he was near, of the sadness he carried, and the strength it must take to keep moving forward. "It was just a long day, Mama. Nothing different." But as she moved through their evening routine, heating up dinner, organizing medications, helping her mother to bed, Brianna couldn't shake the feeling that everything was different, not in grand, sweeping ways, but in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, in the moments when silence spoke louder than words. Later, lying in her own bed, she stared at the ceiling and thought about grief, about how it shaped people like water shapes stone. She thought about Marcus Hawthorne and wondered if he was awake too, haunted by memories of a life that no longer existed. Her phone lit up with another text from Tasha. "You still owe me details. Lunch tomorrow?" Brianna smiled despite herself, typing back a quick yes. She needed Tasha's light, her unwavering ability to see hope in every situation. Because tomorrow she would walk into that clinic again, and she would see him, and now she would know about his loss, about the reason for his silence, about the weight he carried. And somehow knowing made everything more complicated and simpler at the same time. She closed her eyes, letting the distant sound of traffic and her mother's breathing from the next room wash over her. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, its own moments of collision and retreat. But for now, in the quiet of her room, Brianna Monroe allowed herself to feel the strange mix of emotions stirring in her chest: compassion, curiosity, and something else she wasn't ready to name. Outside, Boston slept, its streets quiet under a blanket of stars. And somewhere in this same city, Marcus Hawthorne sat in his sparse apartment, looking at an old photograph of a smiling woman he could no longer touch, wondering why, for the first time in a year, the pain felt just a little less sharp, a little less consuming. Neither of them knew it yet, but their worlds had already begun to orbit each other, pulled together by forces as inevitable as gravity itself. And sometimes in the space between heartbeats, between coffee spills and careful words, between grief and hope, love finds its way in, not with a bang, but with a whisper so soft you might miss it if you weren't paying attention. The lunch rush at Rosie's diner was in full swing, the clatter of plates and hum of conversations filling the small space. Brianna sat across from Tasha in their usual booth, watching her friend attack a plate of loaded fries with her characteristic enthusiasm. The sun streaming through the window caught the gold highlights in Tasha's braids, making them sparkle as she gestured emphatically. "So you're telling me," Tasha said between bites, her honey-colored eyes sparkling with mischief, "that this man hasn't said more than 10 words to you since the great coffee incident? After 3 whole days?" Brianna pushed her salad around her plate, avoiding her friend's knowing gaze. "He's professional, Tash. It's not like we're supposed to be having heart-to-heart conversations between appointments." Tasha wiped her hands on a napkin, her silver bangles jingling. "And that's why you've been checking your phone every 30 seconds? Because it's so professional." Heat crept up Brianna's neck. "I'm waiting for the nurse to update me on Mum's new medication schedule." "Right. And I'm just working 2 jobs because I love being sleep-deprived." Tasha leaned forward, her expression softening. "B, when was the last time you actually looked at someone? I mean really looked, not just as another responsibility to manage." The question hit too close to home. Brianna thought of Marcus's eyes, of the way he moved through the clinic like someone trying not to disturb the air around him. "It's not like that," she said quietly. He's been through something big." Understanding dawned on Tasha's face. "The way you've been through something? Always carrying everyone else's weight?" Before Brianna could respond, her phone buzzed. Actually, the nurse this time. She read the message and felt her shoulders tense. "Mom's having a rough day. The new medication is making her dizzy." "Go," Tasha said immediately, already signaling for the check. "I've got to head to the salon anyway. Mrs. Peterson's roots won't fix themselves." Outside the diner, Tasha pulled Brianna into a tight hug, her familiar scent of coconut oil and hair products wrapping around them both. "Just don't close yourself off to possibilities, okay? Even broken people deserve chances." The words followed Brianna back to the clinic, echoing in her mind as she settled behind her desk. The afternoon schedule was full, and she immersed herself in the familiar rhythm of checking in patients, filing insurance claims, and keeping the carefully orchestrated dance of appointments flowing smoothly. It was during a rare quiet moment that she heard it, music drifting from the back of the clinic, not the usual bland instrumental tracks they played during therapy sessions, but something different, something real. Before she could stop herself, her feet carried her toward the sound. She found herself at the door of Treatment Room C, where Marcus was preparing for his next patient. A small Bluetooth speaker sat on the windowsill, playing what she recognized as classical piano music. He looked up as she appeared in the doorway, his hands stilling over the fresh towels he was arranging. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Chopin," she said finally, surprising herself. "Nocturne in E-flat major." Something shifted in his expression, surprise followed by a flicker of genuine interest. "You know classical music? My mum used to play." The words came out soft, weighted with memory. "Before she got sick, she taught piano lessons from our living room." Marcus's movements slowed, became more deliberate. "Used to," he repeated, and she heard the understanding in his voice, the recognition of loss, of before and after. "She can't control her hands well enough anymore," Brianna explained, not sure why she was sharing this with him. "But she still listens. Says music speaks when words aren't enough." He turned to face her fully then, and for the first time, she saw his walls lower slightly. "Your mother sounds wise." "She is." Brianna hesitated, then added, "She's having a rough day today. New medications." Marcus nodded, and something in his posture changed, became less the distant professional and more the healer she glimpsed when he worked with patients. Medication adjustments are always difficult, both for the patient and, he paused, his eyes meeting hers, for those who care for them. The understanding in his voice made her throat tight. Before she could respond, the front desk phone rang, its shrill tone shattering the moment between them. "I should," she gestured vaguely toward the reception area. "Of course." He turned back to his preparations, but then called softly, "Ms. Monroe?" She paused in the doorway. "There's a therapy technique we sometimes use with patients struggling with medication side effects. Nothing complex, just some simple exercises to help with dizziness and balance. If you'd like, I could—" "Yes," she said, perhaps too quickly. "I mean, that would be helpful. Thank you." He nodded once, and she hurried back to her desk, her heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of appointments and paperwork, but she was acutely aware of his presence, of the music that continued to drift through the clinic, changing from Chopin to Beethoven to something modern she didn't recognize. At closing time, she found a neatly folded paper on her desk. Inside, in his precise handwriting, were detailed instructions for the exercises he'd mentioned, along with a note. "Music helps with the timing. Nocturnes work best." She stared at the paper, at the care taken in each written word, and felt something shift in her chest, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known was there. That evening, as she helped her mother through the exercises, the familiar strains of Chopin's Nocturne playing softly from her phone, Brianna thought about healing, how it comes in different forms, how sometimes the smallest gestures carry the most weight. "He must be special," her mother said suddenly, her eyes sharp despite her fatigue. "Who? Whoever gave you these exercises, whoever put that look in your eyes." Brianna focused on supporting her mother's arm through the next movement. "He's just being kind. Kindness is never just anything, baby." Her mother's hand squeezed hers weakly, especially when it comes from someone who understands loss. Later that night, after her mother had fallen asleep, Brianna sat at their old piano. She didn't play, hadn't touched the keys in years, but she ran her fingers over them gently, thinking about music and silence, about speaking without words. Her phone lit up with a message from Dr. Reeves. "Administrative position interviews start next week. You're first on the list." The opportunity she'd been working toward, the chance for better pay, for stability, for evening classes at the community college, it was all within reach. She should have felt elated. Instead, she found herself thinking about green-grey eyes and careful words, about classical music drifting through clinic hallways. Across the city, Marcus sat in his sparsely furnished apartment, a glass of untouched whiskey on the table beside him. The wedding photo he usually kept face down was upright tonight, his late wife's smile frozen in time. But for the first time in a year, he found himself thinking not about what he'd lost, but about dark eyes that saw too much, about strength wrapped in vulnerability, about music speaking when words couldn't. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were both taking small steps, away from their carefully constructed solitudes, towards something neither was ready to name. And sometimes, in the space between notes in a nocturne, in the silence between written words, in the pause between breaths, the heart finds its own rhythm, one that has nothing to do with what's planned and everything to do with what's possible. The interview was scheduled for 9 a.m., but Brianna had been at her desk since 7, every folder precisely aligned, every document triple-checked. The autumn rain tapped against the clinic's windows, creating a rhythm that matched her nervous heartbeat. "Your mother's medical bills aren't going to pay themselves," she whispered to her reflection in the computer screen, straightening her blazer, thrifted but elegant, a deep burgundy that made her skin glow. Her curls were styled into a neat updo, professional and polished, though a few rebellious strands had already escaped around her temples. The sound of the front door opening made her look up, expecting Dr. Reeves. Instead, she found Marcus standing in the doorway, rain dripping from his broad shoulders. Their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. "You're early," he said softly, moving toward his office. "Interview day," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. He paused, turning back to face her. "The administrative position?" She nodded, surprising herself by adding, "My mum's treatments. The better salary would help." His expression shifted, something like understanding darkening his eyes. He disappeared into his office, returning moments later with a small paper cup of water. He placed it on her desk without ceremony. "For the nerves," he explained simply. Then, after a moment's hesitation, "You're more qualified than you think." Before she could respond, Dr. Reeves bustled in, followed by a man Brianna didn't recognize, tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that seemed to repel the rain. "Brianna, perfect. You're ready?" Dr. Reeves beamed. "This is Mr. Richardson from the board. He'll be sitting in on the interviews today." The morning unfolded like a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. The questions came rapid fire, each one more probing than the last. Brianna answered with careful precision, drawing on years of experience, on late nights studying healthcare administration, on every moment she'd spent making this clinic run smoothly. But something felt off. The way Mr. Richardson's eyes kept sliding past her, the slight curl of his lip when she mentioned her community college courses. She recognized that look, had seen it too many times before. When the interview ended, she knew it in the way Mr. Richardson's handshake was barely a touch, in the way Dr. Reeves wouldn't quite meet her eyes. The rain had intensified by lunch, matching her mood. She sat at her desk, mechanically processing insurance forms, trying not to think about the way Mr. Richardson had looked at the next candidate, a young man fresh out of business school, with the right connections and the right background. "Ms. Monroe." She looked up to find Marcus standing at her desk, his expression unreadable. "Would you mind helping me with something in treatment room C?" Confused but grateful for the distraction, she followed him. The room was empty, the afternoon's first patient not due for another hour. Classical music played softly from his speaker, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata this time. "What did you need help with?" she asked, noting how the rain cast shifting shadows across his face. Instead of answering, he closed the door and turned to face her. "You didn't get it. It wasn't a question." Brianna felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "How did you—" "I saw your face when they left. I recognized that look." His voice was soft but intense. The look of someone being judged for everything except what matters. The understanding in his words undid her. "I've worked here for 3 years," she whispered. "I know every patient, every procedure, every insurance code. I've taken night classes, studied everything I could about healthcare administration. But none of that matters because people see what they expect to see," he finished, and there was an edge to his voice she'd never heard before. "Because it's easier to stick to their predetermined script than to recognize real merit." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw something she hadn't noticed before. Anger. Not at her, but for her. It made her breath catch. "When Laura, my wife, Kaz, was sick," he said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise even him. The doctors looked at her the same way. Young, female, complaining of pain they couldn't immediately diagnose. They dismissed her symptoms as stress, as anxiety. By the time they found the tumor, he stopped abruptly, his hands clenching at his sides. Brianna moved without thinking, touching his arm gently. He didn't pull away. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, understanding now why he'd become a physical therapist, why he treated every patient with such careful attention. "The point is," he continued, his voice rough, "sometimes the system is wrong. Sometimes the people making decisions are wrong, but that doesn't make you wrong." The music swelled around them, filling the silence that followed his words. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, but in that room something else was building, something electric and inevitable. "I should get back to work," Brianna said finally, though she didn't move. "Yes," he agreed, but his eyes held hers, saying something entirely different. The moment was broken by voices in the hallway, the next patient arriving early. They stepped apart, the professional mask sliding back into place for both of them. But something had changed. As Brianna returned to her desk, she felt different. Not healed exactly, but understood. And sometimes understanding is its own kind of healing. The afternoon passed in a blur of patience and paperwork. When evening came, she found another note on her desk, written in Marcus's precise hand. "Some battles are worth fighting twice. The position at Memorial Hospital is still open. Their loss could be your chance." She stared at the note, something stirring in her chest. Through the window, she could see the rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets gleaming and new. On her bus ride home, she made two decisions. First, she would apply for the Memorial Hospital position, not because Marcus suggested it, but because she refused to let one rejection define her worth. Second, she would stop pretending she wasn't falling for a man who understood loss as intimately as she did. At home, her mother was having a good day, sitting up in bed with a novel. "You're quiet tonight," she observed as Brianna checked her vitals. "Just thinking about changes," Brianna replied, her mind full of grey-green eyes and careful words. "Changes can be good," her mother said wisely, "especially when they make your eyes light up like that." Later, as she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. "Heard about today. Want me to come over and plot revenge?" Brianna smiled, typing back, "No revenge needed, but I could use help with a job application." Across the city, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at an old photo of Laura. "I told someone about you today," he whispered to the image. "Really told them, and for the first time, it didn't feel like betrayal." He thought about Brianna's gentle touch on his arm, about the strength he saw beneath her vulnerability, about how helping her fight her battles made him feel more alive than he had in months. Neither of them slept much that night, their minds full of shared moments and unspoken words, and sometimes, in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, between rain and clearing skies, between loss and possibility, the heart begins to remember how to hope. The call came at 3:47 a.m. Brianna was already awake, putting the finishing touches on her Memorial Hospital application. When her mother's nurse's number flashed on the screen, the world seemed to stop spinning. "She's asking for you," the nurse said, her voice tight with concern. The fever spiked suddenly and her blood pressure. Brianna was moving before the sentence finished, muscle memory guiding her through the motions. Shoes, keys, jacket. The night air hit her face as she ran to the street, desperately scanning for any sign of an available cab. A familiar car slowed beside her, Dr. Reeves's silver Volvo. "Get in," the older woman commanded, already opening the passenger door. "The nurse called me too." The hospital corridors were a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. Her mother looked small in the emergency room bed, her dark skin ashen, her breathing labored. The doctors spoke in clipped tones about infection, about compromised immune systems, about waiting and watching. Dawn found Brianna slumped in an uncomfortable chair, her carefully formatted job application forgotten on her laptop at home. Dr. Reeves had left an hour ago, extracting a promise from Brianna to call if anything changed. "Miss Monroe?" She looked up to find Marcus standing in the doorway, still in his running clothes, concern etched on his features. The sight of him, solid, real, unexpected, made her throat tight. "Dr. Reeves told me," he explained softly, moving into the room. "I was out for my morning run, and the hospital was on my route." The casual lie was kind. The hospital was nowhere near his usual running path. She'd overheard him discussing his route with a patient just last week. "You didn't have to come," she managed, but her voice betrayed her. He didn't respond immediately, instead studying the various monitors attached to her mother. his professional knowledge evident in his gaze. "The fever's down," he noted. "That's good." Brianna nodded, too exhausted to speak. Without asking, Marcus disappeared and returned minutes later with 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in her hands, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. "The memorial application was due today," she said suddenly, the words spilling out. "I was just finishing it when—" "I'll call them," he interrupted gently. "Explain the situation, they'll understand." "You don't have to." "I want to." His voice was firm but tender. "Let someone help Brianna, just this once." The use of her first name, the first time he'd ever said it, broke something inside her. The tears she'd been holding back since the phone call finally came, hot and silent. Without hesitation, Marcus pulled her into his arms. She cried against his chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong through his running shirt, smelling the morning air still clinging to his skin. His hands were warm on her back, grounding her, holding her together as she fell apart. "I can't lose her," she whispered into his shirt. "I can't—" "Shh," he soothed, his chin resting on top of her head. "You're not alone in this." A small sound from the bed made them both turn. Her mother's eyes were open, watching them with a mix of pain and knowing tenderness. "Mom!" Brianna pulled away from Marcus, wiping her eyes as she rushed to the bedside. "How are you feeling?" "Like I interrupted something important," her mother said weakly, but her eyes sparkled with their old mischief. Marcus stepped forward, his professional demeanor sliding back into place, though his eyes remained soft. "Mrs. Monroe, I'm Marcus Hawthorne from the clinic. It's an honor to finally meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Ah," her mother smiled, "the one who likes Chopin." Color touched Marcus's cheeks, a sight so unexpected it made Brianna's heart skip. "Your daughter mentioned you were a piano teacher." "Were," her mother corrected gently. "But music never really leaves you, does it, even when everything else changes?" Something passed between them then, an understanding that Brianna couldn't quite grasp, but felt in her bones. Marcus nodded, a gesture heavy with meaning. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of the doctor, charts in hand. Marcus squeezed Brianna's shoulder once before stepping back. "I'll take care of the memorial situation," he promised quietly. "You take care of what matters." She watched him leave, his broad shoulders disappearing down the corridor, before turning back to the doctor's update. The news was cautiously optimistic. The infection was responding to treatment, the fever continuing to decrease. Hours later, with her mother sleeping peacefully and the crisis past, Brianna checked her phone to find several messages. From Tasha, "On my way with real food and fresh clothes." "Don't argue." From Dr. Reeves, "Take all the time you need, we've got things covered." And from Marcus, "Memorial HR extending the deadline. Application on your laptop has been submitted. Hope you don't mind that I had Tasha send it. Interview scheduled for next week. Your mother's right about music never leaving. Some things, once they touch us, become part of who we are." She read his message twice, understanding he wasn't just talking about music. Her mother stirred, and Brianna took her fragile hand, thinking about strength and vulnerability, about how some people walk into your life exactly when you need them most. "He's good for you," her mother murmured, not opening her eyes. "He sees you." "I know," Brianna whispered, and for the first time, she let herself fully acknowledge the truth of it. Later that evening, after Tasha had come and gone with her whirlwind of energy and care, after the night nurse had arrived and the hospital had settled into its quieter rhythms, Brianna found herself in the hospital chapel. She wasn't particularly religious, but something about the peaceful space called to her. Soft piano music drifted through the door, a volunteer playing hymns on an old upright piano. The melody was simple but touching, and Brianna closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. In the music she heard echoes of her mother's stronger days, of Marcus's quiet understanding, of all the moments that had led her here. Her phone buzzed one last time. Marcus again. "Music helps heal what words can't touch." "Get some rest, Brianna. Tomorrow is another day." She smiled, tucking the phone away, and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, some breaking points are really beginning points in disguise. And sometimes, in the space between crisis and calm, between professional distance and personal connection, between what we fear and what we hope, love grows stronger than we ever thought possible. The Memorial Hospital lobby gleamed with morning light as Brianna stepped through its revolving doors, her heels clicking against the polished floor. A week had passed since her mother's hospitalization, and life had settled into a new rhythm, one that felt both fragile and stronger than before. "You've got this," Tasha had declared that morning. helping Brianna choose the perfect interview outfit, a deep blue dress that made her look both professional and powerful. Show them what they missed out on at the clinic. Now, sitting in Memorial's waiting area, Brianna touched the small note in her pocket. Marcus's handwriting neat and sure. Trust your strength. It's what makes you extraordinary. He'd left it on her desk that morning, along with a cup of coffee from their shared spot, Hidden Bean. The interview itself was unlike anything she'd expected. Instead of the dismissive glances she'd endured at the clinic, the panel of administrators at Memorial listened intently as she outlined her ideas for improving patient care coordination. They asked meaningful questions about her experience, her education plans, her vision for the future. Your understanding of both the administrative and human aspects of healthcare is impressive, Ms. Monroe, the head administrator commented, studying her resume. It's rare to find someone who can bridge that gap so effectively. Walking out 2 hours later, Brianna felt lighter somehow, as if a weight she'd carried for years had finally shifted. Her phone buzzed with a text from the home nurse. "Your mother's doing well. Ask me to remind you to breathe." She smiled, typing back a quick thank you before heading to the clinic for her afternoon shift. The familiar street seemed different today, filled with possibility rather than limitation. The clinic's atmosphere hit her as soon as she walked in. Something was wrong. Dr. Reeves stood at the reception desk, her face drawn with concern, as she spoke in hushed tones with Marcus. They both looked up when Brianna entered, their expressions making her heart skip. "What happened?" she asked, dropping her bag at her desk. "Corporate's selling the clinic," Dr. Reeves said without preamble. "They're consolidating resources, focusing on larger facilities. We have 3 months." The news landed like a physical blow. This place wasn't just a job. It was a community, a family of sorts. She thought of their patients, many of whom had been coming here for years, who trusted them, who needed them. "There has to be something we can do," Brianna said, her mind already racing through possibilities. "The patient base, the location." "Actually," Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying an edge of something she couldn't quite read, "there might be." Dr. Reeves looked at him sharply. "Marcus?" He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "I've been thinking about opening my own practice. Something smaller, more focused on individual care. When Laura... After everything, I promised myself I'd build something meaningful, something that puts people before profits. But that would take significant investment," Dr. Reeves pointed out. "The equipment alone..." "I have savings," he said quietly, "and connections with medical equipment suppliers from my previous work. It's not impossible." Brianna watched his face as he spoke, seeing the passion beneath his usual reserve. This wasn't a sudden decision, she realized. He'd been planning this, waiting for the right moment. "The staff would need to be minimal at first," he continued, his eyes meeting Brianna's. "Just the essentials. Someone who understands both the administrative side and the human element. Someone who knows our patients, our community." Her heart stuttered as she understood what he wasn't saying directly. "You'd need a partner," she heard herself say. "Someone invested in the long-term vision." The word partner hung in the air between them, heavy with multiple meanings. "Yes," he agreed softly, still holding her gaze. "I would." Dr. Reeves looked between them, a small smile playing at her lips. "Well," she said, gathering her papers, "I think I'll let you two discuss the possibilities. Whatever you decide, you have my full support." After she left, silence filled the reception area. Brianna's mind was spinning with implications, with possibilities, with fears and hopes all tangled together. "The Memorial interview," she started. "It went well." "I'm not surprised," Marcus said, moving closer to her desk. "You're exceptional at everything you do." The compliment, delivered in his straightforward way, made her breath catch. "This idea of yours, it's risky. Starting from scratch, competing with larger facilities. Life is risk," he said quietly. "I learned that the hard way. But sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one at all." She thought about her mother's words from the hospital. "He sees you." Looking at Marcus now, she knew it was true. He saw her potential, her strength, her worth, not as an employee, but as an equal. "I need time," she said finally, "to think about it, to talk to my mother, to consider everything." "Of course," he nodded, understanding as always. "But Brianna?" "Yes, whatever you decide about Memorial or this, it won't change what's growing between us. I need you to know that." The words, spoken in his deep, sincere voice, made her heart race. Before she could respond, patients began arriving for the afternoon sessions, and they both fell back into their professional roles. But something had shifted. like earth moving beneath their feet. As she worked through the afternoon, handling appointments and paperwork with practiced ease, Brianna felt the weight of possibility pressing against her chest. She thought about what it would mean to build something new, something that truly mattered. That evening, as she sat with her mother sharing the day's events over dinner, she felt the pieces of her life realigning themselves into a new pattern. "You're glowing," her mother observed, "stronger now, but still moving carefully." "This isn't just about business decisions, is it?" Brianna thought about Marcus's eyes when he talked about his vision, about the way he'd said partner, about all the unspoken things growing between them. "No," she admitted softly, "it's not." Later, alone in her room, she reread Marcus's note from that morning. "Trust your strength." The words seemed to hold new meaning now. Her phone lit up with a text from him. No pressure, just possibility. Sometimes that's enough to build on. She smiled, thinking about music and silence, about loss and new beginnings, about the courage it takes to reach for something real. Outside her window, Boston's lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in years, the future looked not just possible, but beautiful. Across the city, Marcus sat at his desk, surrounded by business plans and equipment catalogues, but his mind was on the way. Brianna's eyes had lit up when he'd said, partner. He touched the wedding ring he still wore, and for the first time it felt not like a chain but like a bridge, from what was to what could be. Sometimes in the space between ending and beginning, between professional and personal, between past and future, love finds its clearest voice, and sometimes the biggest leaps of faith are the ones that lead us home. The Memorial Hospital offer letter sat unopened on Brianna's kitchen table, its crisp white envelope a stark contrast to the scattered papers covered in her neat handwriting, calculations, projections, and possibilities for the new clinic. A week had passed since Marcus's proposal, and she'd spent every spare moment analyzing the choice before her. "You're overthinking it," Tasha declared, sliding a fresh cup of tea across the table. She'd arrived an hour ago with takeout and determination, her bright yellow dress a spot of sunshine in Brianna's uncertainty. "Your heart already knows the answer." "My heart isn't the most reliable decision-maker," Brianna countered, but even as she said it, her mind drifted to that morning at the clinic. She'd arrived early, as usual, to find Marcus already there, his sleeves rolled up as he measured the treatment rooms. He'd looked up when she entered, and something in his eyes made her forget every carefully reasoned argument she'd prepared. "Just looking at possibilities," he'd said softly, and they both knew he wasn't just talking about room dimensions. Now, sitting with Tasha, Brianna reached for the memorial envelope. The safe choice would be— "Safe?" Tasha interrupted, her honey-colored eyes flashing. "Girl, when has safe ever made anyone happy? When has safe ever changed the world?" From the next room, Brianna's mother called out, "Listen to her, baby. She's making sense for once." "I heard that," Tasha shouted back, grinning. "See? Even your mama knows I'm right." Brianna smiled despite herself, remembering how her mother had improved steadily over the past week, her strength returning along with her sharp wit. Just yesterday, she'd caught her mother trying to play the piano, just simple scales, but the sound had filled their small apartment with hope. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Meeting with the equipment supplier tomorrow. No pressure, but if you're interested." Before she could respond, another text arrived. "I miss your voice in the morning meetings. The clinic feels wrong without you there." Her heart jumped at the simple honesty of his words. She'd taken a few days off to think, to plan, to be sure her decision wouldn't be swayed by proximity to those green-gray eyes and quiet strength. "Oh, honey," Tasha said, reading the messages over her shoulder, "you're not fooling anyone. I've seen how you look at him when you think no one's watching." "It's not that simple," Brianna protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Actually," her mother said, appearing in the doorway with careful steps, "it is that simple. You're just afraid to admit it." Brianna looked at her mother, stronger now but still fragile, still needing care. "Mum, don't you dare use me as an excuse," her mother interrupted firmly. "I didn't raise you to live half a life because you're worried about me. Marcus understands responsibility, understands care. I see it in his eyes when he looks at you." "When did you become such an expert on Marcus?" Brianna asked, surprised. Her mother smiled mysteriously. "He visits me, you know. Brings me books about physical therapy exercises. Talks about music. Yesterday he asked my permission to partner with you, professionally and perhaps more." The revelation stunned Brianna into silence. She thought about Marcus, who guarded his privacy so carefully, taking the time to connect with her mother, to understand her world. "He said something interesting," her mother continued, easing herself into a chair. "He said, some people carry their strength so quietly you have to listen carefully to hear it roar. He was talking about you, baby." Tears pricked at Brianna's eyes. She thought about the clinic, about the patients who trusted them, about the community they'd built. The memorial position would be prestigious, secure, but it wouldn't be hers, not really. Not like the possibility of building something new, something that mattered. Standing abruptly, she grabbed her keys. "I need to go somewhere." Tasha and her mother exchanged knowing looks. "Go get him, girl," Tasha called as Brianna hurried out. The evening air was crisp with autumn's promise as Brianna drove to the clinic. She knew he'd be there. He always worked late on Thursdays, reviewing patient files in the quiet after hours. The clinic's lights were dim, but she could see him through the window, sitting at his desk, completely absorbed in his work. Her heart did that familiar skip as she watched him, remembering every small moment that had led to this one. The door was unlocked. He looked up at her entrance, surprise and something else flickering across his features. "Brianna." She moved to his office with purpose, holding his gaze. "Ask me again." He stood slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. About the partnership, about everything. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Marcus moved around his desk, closing the distance between them with measured steps. "Partner with me," he said softly. "Help me build something that matters. Be the strength I need to make this work." He paused, then added with quiet intensity, "Stay in my life not because it's safe, but because it's right." Brianna felt the truth of it resonate in her bones. "Yes," she whispered. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle but sure. "To which part?" "All of it." The kiss, when it came, felt like coming home. His lips were soft against hers, careful at first, then deeper as she responded. She felt the tremor in his hands, the way his breath caught when she pressed closer. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you spilled coffee on me." She laughed softly, her hands still gripping his shirt. "Is that why you kept playing Chopin? To romance me?" "Maybe," he admitted with a small smile. "Did it work?" Instead of answering, she kissed him again, pouring everything she couldn't say into the gesture. When they separated, his eyes were darker, intense with emotion. "We'll need to work hard," he said, ever practical even in this moment. "Starting a new clinic won't be easy." "Nothing worth having ever is," she replied, thinking of her mother's strength, of Tasha's determination, of their shared understanding of loss and hope. Later that night, after lengthy discussions about business plans and dreams, after more kisses that made the world spin, Brianna returned home to find her mother at the piano, playing a simple but beautiful melody. "Chopin?" Brianna asked, recognizing the piece. "Seemed appropriate," her mother smiled. "Did you figure it out?" "Yes," Brianna said, touching her lips where she could still feel Marcus's kiss. "I'm choosing the harder path, the scarier one, the right one." "Good," her mother nodded. "That's my girl." As the music filled their apartment, Brianna thought about strength and choice, about coffee spills and classical music, about the way love sometimes arrives disguised as possibility. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Thank you for trusting me, for trusting us." Sometimes, in the space between safety and risk, between what we know and what we dream, between a single moment and a lifetime, the heart makes its boldest moves. And sometimes, choosing the harder path leads us exactly where we need to be. The small storefront on Beacon Street wasn't much to look at yet. Paint peeled from the window frames, and the floor needed refinishing. But Brianna could see the potential. Standing in the empty space, morning light streaming through dusty windows, she could envision what it would become. "The treatment rooms would go here," Marcus explained, his arm warm around her waist as he gestured to the back area. "Reception up front with a small waiting area. It's not as big as the old clinic, but—" "It's perfect," she interrupted, turning to face him. 2 weeks had passed since their first kiss, since she'd chosen this path, and she hadn't regretted it for a moment. "It feels right." His eyes softened as he looked at her, that special smile he seemed to reserve just for her playing at his lips. "You feel right," he said quietly, then cleared his throat. "I mean, you here, planning this. It feels—" "I know," she smiled, reaching up to straighten his collar. The gesture felt intimate, domestic in a way that made her heart flutter. "So, when do we tell the patients?" The question sobered them both. They had 2 months left at the old clinic, 2 months to prepare this space, to transfer patients, to build something new from the ground up. Dr. Reeves is announcing the closure next week, Marcus said, his hand finding hers. We can start talking to patients then about the transition. The sound of heels clicking on hardwood made them turn. Tasha stood in the doorway, her bright red blazer a splash of color against the bare walls. Well, she demanded, surveying the space with her designer's eye. Is this the one? This is it, Brianna confirmed, watching her friend prowl the perimeter, already sketching ideas on her tablet. Good, because I've got concepts for days. That wall? Perfect for a statement piece. And these windows? The natural light is everything. Tasha paused, looking at them knowingly. Plus, it's only 10 minutes from Bee's place. Convenient for late-night paperwork. Marcus coughed, a slight blush touching his cheeks, while Brianna shot her friend a warning look. Their relationship was still new, still precious and private, though anyone with eyes could see the change between them. The contractor's coming at noon, Marcus said, checking his watch. We should head to the clinic. Morning appointments. The drive to work was comfortable, filled with quiet discussions about paint colors and equipment placement. At a red light, Marcus reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Having second thoughts? He asked softly. Not one, she replied, squeezing his hand. The clinic was already busy when they arrived. Brianna settled at her desk, organizing the day's files, while stealing glances at Marcus as he prepared for his first patient. Everything felt different now, charged with possibility. Mid-morning, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Therapy session went well. The new exercises are helping. Your man knows his stuff. Brianna smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. Marcus had insisted on overseeing her mother's physical therapy personally, working with her 3 times a week to rebuild her strength. The way he cared for her mother, with such gentle patience, made Brianna fall a little more in love with him every day. Love. The word had crept up on her, settling into her heart when she wasn't looking. She wasn't sure when it had happened, maybe during those early morning coffee moments, or in the quiet ways he anticipated her needs, or in how he looked at her like she was something precious and strong at the same time. Ms. Monroe, Mrs. Henderson, one of their elderly patients, approached her desk. Is it true about the clinic closing? Brianna hesitated, the official announcement not yet made. But Mrs. Henderson had been coming here for years, trusting them with her care. Some changes are coming, she said carefully. But we'll still be here for you. Marcus's voice came from behind her. He moved to stand beside Brianna's desk, professional but present, just in a new location. Same care, same commitment. Sup? Henderson looked between them, understanding dawning in her wise eyes. Together, they confirmed in unison, then shared a small smile at their synchronicity. The rest of the day passed in a blur of patience and preparations. After hours, they sat in Marcus's office, surrounded by business plans and permit applications. The evening light cast long shadows across the floor, and soft classical music played from his speaker, their soundtrack now. We should talk about the ring, Brianna said suddenly, her eyes on his left hand where the wedding band still rested. Marcus stilled, his pen hovering over the paper. I've been thinking about that, he admitted quietly. About when Laura would want me to be happy, to live fully again. I just need time, she finished for him, understanding completely. There's no rush, no pressure. We're building everything else together. This can wait until you're ready. He looked at her then, his eyes full of emotion. How did I get so lucky? You spilled coffee on the right girl, she teased, trying to lighten the moment. Actually, you spilled coffee on me, he corrected, pulling her from her chair into his lap. Best thing that ever happened to me. Their kiss was sweet and slow, full of promise. When they parted, Brianna rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. We should go, she sighed. Mum's nurse leaves at 8. I'll drive you, he said, but neither moved for a long moment. Finally, gathering their things, they walked to his car, hand in hand. The city was quiet, settling into evening, and Brianna felt a deep sense of peace despite all the uncertainty ahead. At her door, Marcus kissed her goodnight, then touched her face gently. Partner meeting tomorrow? The contractor's bringing the final estimates. Partner meeting, she agreed, loving how the word had taken on new meaning. Inside, she found her mother at the piano, playing softly. Good day, she asked, noting Brianna's smile. The best kind, Brianna replied, sitting beside her mother on the bench. The kind where dreams start becoming real. Her mother nodded, her fingers still moving over the keys. He's good for you and you're good for him. Sometimes healing comes in unexpected ways. Later that night, As Brianna reviewed their business plans one last time, her phone lit up with a message from Marcus. Just found the perfect waiting room chairs. Modern, but comfortable. Like us. Practical, but with hidden depths. She smiled, typing back, "Are you comparing us to furniture?" His response came quickly. "I'm comparing us to anything that fits perfectly together. Sometimes in the space between what was and what will be, between professional and personal, between healing and being healed, love builds its strongest foundations. And sometimes the scariest leaps lead to the most beautiful landings." The letter from the bank arrived on a Tuesday morning, its contents sending a cold wave through the warmth Brianna had been living in. Standing in her apartment's kitchen, she read it 3 times, her hands shaking slightly. The construction costs for the new clinic had exceeded estimates, significantly. The loan they'd been counting on was now in question, pending further review. 6 weeks before their planned opening, with the old clinic's closure looming, everything was suddenly balancing on a knife's edge. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, his timing uncanny as always. "Meeting with the contractor pushed to 2 p.m. Everything okay? You're usually at the clinic by now." She stared at his message, her throat tight. He'd invested so much already. His savings, his dreams, his heart. How could she tell him that it might not be enough? "On my way," she typed back, gathering her things. But instead of heading to the clinic, she found herself driving to Memorial Hospital. The administrative offices were quiet this early. Linda Carter, the HR director who had interviewed her weeks ago, looked up in surprise as Brianna appeared in her doorway. "Ms. Monroe, this is unexpected." "I'm sorry to come unannounced," Brianna started, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I needed to ask, is the position still open?" Linda's eyes widened slightly. "Actually, yes. Our first choice didn't work out. Are you saying you're interested?" Before Brianna could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Tasha. "Girl, where are you? Your man is looking like a lost puppy at the clinic. Also, the paint samples arrived, and I need your input stat." Reality crashed back in. What was she doing here? This wasn't her anymore. The safe choice, the expected path. She thought about Marcus, about their shared dreams, about all they'd built together in these past weeks. "I'm sorry," she said to Linda, standing abruptly. "I shouldn't have come. I already have a position, the best one I could ask for." The drive to the clinic was a blur of autumn colors and racing thoughts. She found Marcus in their future treatment room, surrounded by paint swatches and equipment catalogs, his sleeves rolled up as he measured wall spaces. He looked up as she entered, his face lighting up before concern crossed his features. "Hey, you okay? You look—" Instead of answering, she held out the bank letter. He read it quickly, his expression growing serious. "Ah," he said softly, "that's why you're late." "Marcus, I went to Memorial," he finished, surprising her. "Linda called me. She's an old colleague, wanted to know if I knew you were job hunting again." Shame washed over her. I went there, but I couldn't." He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "I know," he murmured into her hair. "I know you, Brianna. You were trying to find a backup plan, a way to protect everyone if this falls apart." She pressed her face into his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "The loan is just one option," he interrupted gently. "I've been making calls all morning. There are other banks, other possibilities. But your saving are just money." He pulled back slightly, lifting her chin to meet her eyes. "What matters is this, us, the dream we're building together." As if to emphasize his point, her mother's voice drifted in from the reception area, where she was sitting with Tasha. "This shade of blue is all wrong. A healing space needs warmth, not an ice palace." Brianna couldn't help laughing, even as tears threatened. "When did she get here?" "About an hour ago." Tasha picked her up, said we needed her expert opinion on colors. Marcus smiled softly. "She's right, you know, about healing spaces needing warmth, understanding past between them. This wasn't just about paint colors or bank loans. It was about building something that mattered, something that could help heal others the way they'd helped heal each other." "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for doubting, for going to Memorial." "Don't be." He touched her face gently. "Your instinct to protect, to plan, to take care of everyone. It's one of the things I love about you." The word hung in the air between them, its weight making her heart skip. They hadn't said it yet, though they both had felt it growing stronger each day. "You love me?" she asked softly. His eyes, those beautiful green-grey eyes that had first caught her attention all those weeks ago, held hers steadily. "More than I thought possible, more than I thought I could ever love again." The kiss that followed was different from their others, deeper, more certain, full of promise and passion and future. When they finally parted, Brianna felt steadier, stronger. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "Good," he smiled, "because I have an idea about the loan situation, but it's a little crazy." Before he could elaborate, Tasha's voice rang out. "If you two are done making out in there, we need decisions about the reception desk. And Mama B says if you pick that sterile white color, she's disowning everyone." They laughed, the tension of the morning breaking. Walking into the reception area hand in hand, they found Tasha surrounded by fabric samples, while Brianna's mother sat regally in a test chair, directing operations like a queen on her throne. "Finally!" Tasha exclaimed. "Now, about these curtains." "Actually," Marcus interrupted, his hand tightening on Brianna's, "I have a proposition for everyone." They all listened as he outlined his plan, using the current space's existing features instead of complete renovation, phasing the improvements over time, starting smaller, but with room to grow. It would mean more work initially, more creative solutions, but it could work. "Plus," he added, looking at Brianna's mother, "we could use a part-time office manager, someone with experience handling difficult personalities and keeping things organized. Someone who might benefit from having a purpose again." Brianna's mother straightened in her chair, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Are you offering me a job, young man?" "If you're interested," he smiled. "The exercises have been helping. A few hours a day at your own pace." Tears shone in her mother's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. "Well," Tasha declared, wiping her own eyes, "that settles it. New plan, new budget, same dream. Now, about these color schemes." Later that night, after hours of planning and replanning, after Tasha had gone home and her mother had fallen asleep smiling, Brianna sat with Marcus on the steps of their future clinic. "You're amazing," she said softly. "The way you think of everything. Everyone." He kissed her temple gently. "I learned from the best. You taught me that healing isn't just about physical therapy. It's about community, about family, about love." Above them, stars peeked through the city's light pollution, and somewhere in the distance a piano played. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But tonight, sitting here with the man she loved, surrounded by the dreams they were building together, Brianna knew that sometimes the biggest leaps of faith led to the most beautiful landings. And sometimes, in the space between fear and faith, between doubt and determination, between what is and what could be, love proves stronger than any bank letter or balance sheet. Because real wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the hearts we touch and the lives we change, one small step at a time. The morning of the new clinic's opening dawned clear and crisp, autumn sunlight streaming through freshly cleaned windows. Brianna stood in the reception area, taking in every detail they'd worked so hard to perfect: the warm terracotta walls Tasha had insisted on, the comfortable seating arranged in welcoming clusters, the sleek reception desk where her mother would soon preside. 6 weeks of endless work had transformed the space, not into the ultra-modern facility they'd first imagined, but into something better, something that felt like home. "Nervous?" Marcus's voice came from behind her, followed by his arms wrapping around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, both of them surveying their creation. "Terrified," she admitted, leaning back against him. "Excited, grateful, everything at once." He turned her in his arms, his eyes soft as they met hers. "I have something for you, before everyone arrives." From his pocket he pulled out a small velvet box. Brianna's heart skipped, then steadied as she saw his expression. Not nervous, just certain. "It's not what you think," he said softly, opening the box to reveal a delicate gold key on a chain. "Or maybe it is, just differently." Inside the box was also a note, written in his precise hand. "To my partner in all things, this is your key to both the clinic and my heart. Both are yours to keep." She touched the key gently, noting how it caught the morning light. "Marcus, I took off my ring last night," he said quietly, and she noticed for the first time his bare left hand. "Not because I've forgotten Laura, but because I'm ready to fully embrace this new chapter with you." Tears pricked at her eyes as he fastened the necklace around her throat, the key settling perfectly against her collarbone. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." His kiss was gentle, but full of promise. "Now, let's open these doors and start changing lives." The morning unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Their first patients, transferred from the old clinic, arrived to find a space that was both familiar and fresh. Brianna's mother held court at the reception desk, her natural warmth making everyone feel welcome, while Tasha flitted around adjusting last-minute details between her salon appointments. Dr. Reeves arrived mid-morning, her arms full of flowers. "For new beginnings," she said, hugging them both. "I'm so proud of what you've created here." Mrs. Henderson, their first patient of the day, emerged from her session beaming. "This place," she declared to the waiting room at large, "has heart. Real heart." Brianna, overhearing from her small office, felt tears threaten again. Through her open door she could see Marcus working with a patient, his hands gentle but sure as he guided them through exercises. He caught her watching and winked, making her heart flutter just like it had that first coffee-spilled morning. The day passed in a blur of emotion and activity. By closing time, exhaustion mingled with satisfaction as they gathered in the break room. Brianna, Marcus, her mother, Tasha, and Dr. Reeves, sharing cake and champagne. "To Healing Hearts Physical Therapy," Dr. Reeves toasted, her eyes twinkling at the name they'd chosen. "May you heal many." "To family," Brianna's mother added, looking stronger and happier than she had in months. "Both blood and chosen." "To love," Tasha declared with her characteristic directness, "because let's be real, that's what built this place." After everyone had gone, Brianna and Marcus stood in their clinic, their home away from home. The setting sun painted the walls gold, and somewhere down the street, piano music drifted through an open window. "Dance with me?" Marcus asked softly, holding out his hand. "Here? Now? Why not? It's our place, our moment." She stepped into his arms, letting him guide her in a slow circle, as Chopin's familiar notes floated around them. "Remember when you first started playing classical music in the treatment rooms?" she asked. I was trying so hard not to fall in love with you. Playing music was the only way I could express what I was feeling. And now," he pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes, "now I don't have to hide anything. I can just love you fully and completely. Even when I reorganize your files," she teased. "Especially then." His smile was tender. "Even when you try to carry the world on your shoulders, or when you worry too much, or when you spend an hour color-coding the appointment calendar." "That calendar system is perfectly logical," she protested, laughing. "I know." He kissed her softly. "It's perfectly you, and you're perfect for me." They swayed together as the last light faded, neither rushing to end the moment. Through the window, Boston's lights began to twinkle, and the piano music played on. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noting her contemplative expression. "About coffee spills," she said honestly. "About how sometimes the biggest changes in our lives start with the smallest moments. About how grief can lead to healing, and healing can lead to love." He nodded, understanding as always. "Life has a way of bringing us where we need to be, even when the path seems unclear. Like bringing a quiet physical therapist and a too responsible receptionist together?" "Exactly like that." His arms tightened around her. "Though you're much more than a receptionist now, you're a businesswoman, a partner, a healer in your own right." She touched the key, resting against her throat, thinking about doors opening, literally and figuratively. "We did it, didn't we? Really did it." "We're doing it," he corrected gently. "Every day, every patient, every moment together. This is just the beginning." Later that night, after final checks and locked doors, after kisses in the parking lot and promises for tomorrow, Brianna sat with her mother at their old piano. Her mother's fingers, stronger now from therapy and purpose, picked out a simple melody. "He's going to propose soon," her mother said matter-of-factly. "I saw him looking at rings on his lunch break." Brianna smiled, her heart full. "I know, and I'm ready." "Of course you are," her mother nodded. "Some loves are worth waiting for, worth building slowly, carefully, until the foundation is unshakable." Across the city, Marcus stood in his apartment, soon to be their apartment, once he found the courage to ask that too. The ring box sat on his dresser, not yet ready, but promising. Like their love, like their clinic, like their future, all works in progress, all growing more beautiful with each passing day. And sometimes, in the space between what was and what will be, between loss and discovery, between a coffee spill and a key on a chain, love writes its own story, not with grand gestures or perfect moments, but with patient hearts and healing hands, with quiet understanding and brave new beginnings. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about instant passion or dramatic declarations. Sometimes they're about two people who understand loss, who choose hope, who build something meaningful together. Sometimes they're about coffee spills and classical music, about keys and promises, about hearts that heal by helping others heal. And sometimes they're about finding home in another person's eyes, about building dreams into reality, about turning endings into beginnings, one small moment at a time. 1 year later, the evening sun painted long shadows across the grand piano that now took pride of place in Healing Hearts Physical Therapy's waiting room. Brianna's mother sat at the keys, her fingers moving with renewed confidence as she played for the small gathering of family and friends. The clinic had grown beyond their dreams over the past year. What started as a leap of faith had blossomed into something extraordinary, not just a place of physical healing, but a sanctuary where broken spirits found their strength again. Brianna stood in the doorway of what was now their shared office, watching Marcus help their last patient of the day, an elderly veteran learning to walk again. Her hand absently touched first the key that still hung around her neck, then the elegant engagement ring that had joined it 3 months ago. The proposal had been perfectly them, quiet, meaningful. During a late-night planning session when they were surrounded by patient files and takeout containers, "I can't imagine building any more of this life without you as my wife," he'd said simply, holding out the ring. "Marry me." She'd said yes before he could finish asking, and they'd celebrated with their usual evening ritual, a shared cup of coffee from Hidden Bean, where it had all begun. "Stop daydreaming and help me with these decorations." Tasha's voice broke through her reverie. Her friend, now the owner of her own thriving salon, was directing the setup for tomorrow's anniversary celebration. "These photos aren't going to hang themselves. The walls would soon be covered with pictures chronicling their first year, patients achieving their goals, staff celebrations, quiet moments caught on camera. At the center would be their favorite, the entire team on opening day, hope bright in their eyes. "I still can't believe you're letting me play tomorrow," her mother called from the piano, her voice stronger than it had been in years. The regular work schedule, carefully managed by Marcus, had done wonders for both her physical and mental health. "Are you sure you don't want someone more professional?" "Mom," Brianna laughed, moving to sit beside her on the bench. "There's no one more perfect for our anniversary celebration than you. Your mother's music is part of our story now," Marcus added, joining them after seeing his patient out, "just like Chopin." He wrapped his arms around Brianna from behind, and she leaned back into his familiar warmth. His left hand was bare now, his wedding ring to Laura carefully stored away, not forgotten, but transformed into a cherished memory rather than a weight. "Speaking of stories," Tasha interrupted, her smile mischievous, "when are you two going to start the next chapter? That new treatment room would make a perfect nursery in a few years." Brianna felt Marcus's small intake of breath, knew he was thinking of the conversation they'd had just last night about future plans and growing families. They had time. They had each other. Everything else would unfold as it should. "One story at a time," Brianna replied, but she couldn't help smiling at the possibility in those words. The last sunlight streamed through windows, now decorated with children's artwork, gifts from their youngest patients. The walls that had once been bare now held healing and hope. The space that had once been empty now overflowed with love. Her mother's fingers moved across the keys, playing the nocturne that had somehow become their song. Marcus hummed along softly, his chest vibrating against Brianna's back. Tasha swayed as she hung the last photo, her bright smile reflecting the joy they all felt. This was their masterpiece, not just the clinic but the family they'd built, the lives they'd touched, the love they'd grown. It hadn't always been easy, but the best stories rarely were. And as the music filled their healing space, as the day settled into evening, as love wrapped around them like a familiar melody, Brianna knew that some endings were really just beautiful beginnings in disguise. The coffee stain from that first morning was still barely visible on the waiting room floor. They'd decided to keep it, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life start with little accidents. Sometimes they start with spilled coffee and borrowed shirts, with quiet music and careful words, with hearts brave enough to try again. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they start with two people who understand that love isn't about perfect moments, but about perfect understanding, about healing together, growing together, building dreams one small step at a time. As the last notes of the nocturne faded into silence, Marcus kissed her temple softly and whispered, "Ready to go home?" Brianna looked around at their creation, at her mother's smile, at Tasha's exuberant energy, at the space they'd filled with so much hope and healing. Then she looked up at the man who had helped her build it all, whose love had given her the courage to dream bigger than she'd ever dared before. "I am home," she whispered back, and in his eyes she saw her truth reflected. Home wasn't just a place, It was this feeling, this love, this life they'd built together. The future stretched before them like an unwritten song, full of possibility and promise. But for now, in this moment, they had everything they needed: each other, their family, their dreams made real, and the endless potential of tomorrow. And somewhere in the distance, as if the universe itself was offering its blessing, the soft notes of a piano drifted through the evening air, playing a melody that sounded remarkably like new beginnings. The end. Between silences and songs showed us that sometimes love is born in the most unexpected moments, through small gestures and mutual understanding. Brianna and Marcus discovered that healing can come in many forms, and that building something meaningful requires courage to take the first step. Have you ever experienced a seemingly ordinary moment that completely changed the course of your life? Just as a simple coffee spill transformed Brianna and Marcus's story, what was your defining moment that seemed small at the time, but proved to be transformative? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.